United Nations Radio, began broadcasting in 1946 from the United Nations headquarters in Lake Success, New York. The first call sign broadcast, this is the United Nations calling the peoples of the world. These documentary and dramatic programs are productions of the United Nations Radio Service, and feature the talents of several Hollywood stars. 1948.
UN Story. Today's UN Story is based on the recent journey across Europe by Mr. Gibson Parker of United Nations Radio and is titled Paris to Istanbul Express.
Train numéro 351, Simplon Orient Express. Attention, train number 351, Rome, Belgrade, Istanbul, en voiture s'il vous plaît.
Well, here I was at last, and with a few minutes to spare. And I leaned out of the window for a moment and watched the people pass. There's a sprinkling from half the countries of Europe. I always play a little game, guessing what they do. And if you're playing this game on me, well, I'm British, conservative neckwear, business, radio, writing, not repairs. And I'm bound for Istanbul.
Simplon Orient Express. En voiture, s'il vous plaît.
The suburbs of Paris were thinning out as I got into my pajamas. I turned in, and as I tried to sleep, the wheels sped through the French countryside, the first leg of a long journey, Paris to Istanbul. I woke up in Switzerland. And as I wandered along to have breakfast, we were running beside the glistening lake of Geneva. The diner seemed to be kilometers away. I went in. Good morning.
Good morning.
The car was crowded, and the head waiter very busy. I found an empty place. I say, do you mind if I join you? This seems to be the only free seat.
Not at all. Sit right down.
Thank you very much.
Et pour vous, monsieur?
I'll have a café complet, s'il vous plaît.
Café complet, bien, monsieur.
Are you going all the way?
Yep, right down to Istanbul.
You know, this train always fascinates me. I suppose as an American, you find it a bit odd, don't you, crossing all these frontiers with the interminable formalities?
Well, no. I think it's a pretty fine thing, a train like this running again, straight across Europe.
Well, of course, the bombing must have ripped up the lines and shattered the rolling stock.
It sure has. I've seen the figures somewhere. About 40,000 miles of European rail track were destroyed. Put that in a straight line, it'll go right around the world. Twice.
That's very impressive.
30,000 bridges blown up. Some countries lost more than half of every kind of railway building they had.
Sounds pretty bad.
And passenger traffic, mind you, was the least of their troubles. The real headache was the freight situation. Freight cars scattered all over the place. French cars in Poland, Dutch cars in Italy. Over half of them in their wrong countries. It was like a jigsaw puzzle.
Yes, I see. And yet, you know, it's an extraordinary thing. Here we are this morning, barely 4 years afterwards, bowling along in the Orient Express, and nothing could seem more normal. But I see you seem to know an awful lot about this situation. Are you connected with railways?
No, I'm with ECE.
You're with what?
ECE.
Oh, yes. What's ECE?
Well, it's the Economic Commission for Europe. One of those commissions of the United Nations.
Oh.
It meets in Geneva, and our job is to...
After the tunnel at Montreux, he really got going, my friend with the vivid American tie. He told me a lot about this Economic Commission, and he had a rather nice way of putting things.
It's kind of a central office where we look after the housekeeping of Europe. Nearly all of Europe's in the ECE, 27 countries, including the Soviet Union. The United States is in it, too.
Is that so?
Yep. You see, after the war, shortages cropped up in everything that it takes to make these countries tick. And worse than that, the shortages chase one another around.
How do you mean?
Well, look, to get more steel, you needed more coal. Now, the coal, in turn, depended on timber and steel for the coal mines and food for miners. One thing always seemed to depend on another, and there was never enough of the other. Believe me, when the war ended, the picture was so...
I asked him along to my compartment as we followed the Rhone along the valley. Soon we were burrowing through the Simplon tunnel under the Alps. We came out in a splash of Italian sun and were running down through the foothills to Domodossola.
So the United Nations got the various governments to come together in Geneva and do something about these bottlenecks, these shortages. It was a new idea, this business of looking at the continent as one complete unit, like the United States. Now, mind you, there were, and there still are, many difficulties in the way.
Passaporti, prego, domodosso, la dogana italiana. Passport, please, signor, Italian customs. Passport.
He stamped my passport, he messed up my bags, and he checked the money in my wallet. We got down, we walked along the platform to stretch our legs, all the way right up to where the locomotive was standing.
Parker, you see that line of trucks waiting at the crossing?
Over there, yeah.
They're hauling fruit from Rome to Rotterdam, rolling night and day through 3 or 4 countries, bringing vitamins to Dutch kids. On the return trip, maybe they'll take fish back to Prague.
Yes, I see.
Through ECE, the governments have agreed to cut out all kinds of red tape which tied up frontiers. Would have been impossible before the war.
You mean you've simplified the whole thing?
Sure. Why, 12 countries have standardized their customs routine at the frontiers. We call this whole thing freedom of the road.
Passeggeri, carrozza, all bordo.
Hey, that means us. We better get back to our car. Take the whole question of touring. The same bus can now take you from the highlands of Scotland to the Alps of Switzerland. From Stockholm, Sweden to
the French Riviera?
Yeah. We're making travel by road painless. No more bales of paper. Your own driver's license will be good in any of these countries, and your own insurance will cover you.
Well, now, that's completely new, isn't it?
Absolutely. I tell you, the day will come when you'll have the same road standards, measurements, signs, and rules of the road. And this is government agreement, mind you, not just a couple of auto clubs getting together.
We'd taken in only a third of the journey, but he seemed to have taken in every problem of transport and frontiers and customs. He had my head reeling.
I didn't tell you about silica bricks.
What in heaven's name are silica bricks?
Why, silica bricks are what you line furnaces with, industrial ovens. A couple of years ago, a great many industries were stymied, with resulting unemployment simply because there was a bad shortage of silica bricks. We took this up at ECE, and I must say the meeting was pretty much a model of the way you can work things out. Before the war, Eastern Europe used to export its raw materials to Western Europe. The Western countries made up the finished articles and exported them back to the East. You follow me?
Yeah.
Now, today, the Eastern countries want that changed. They want to increase their own industry and production, you see. Now, to do that, they'll have to buy machinery and all kinds of materials from the West. If they can do that, they'll raise their standard of living and their purchasing power.
All that should look extremely healthy.
It should. But what happens if somewhere along the line between East and West you arrive at a political impasse?
Trieste, Trieste, we arrive in Trieste. Have your passports ready, please?
Trieste, a trouble spot. Under the station lights, there was the usual melting pot of travelers, and among them, the red cap bands and white helmets of a group of British and American military police stood out near the transportation office. We stopped for quite a while because we were, after all, the most important train of the day and needed close attention. So it was late when we started out on the next lap of our journey, and as the train climbed, it became a little chilly.
Even during the Cold War, East and West have been sitting together around a table every day of the year. And we've had plenty of unanimous agreements.
We smoked a last cigarette, and it was the small hours of the morning when we said goodnight in the corridor outside my compartment.
Oh, by the way.
Hmm?
I suppose you know where we are now.
I haven't the faintest idea, old boy.
We're in Yugoslavia.
You mean we've crossed the, You mean we're behind the,
Yep. I guess so.
Oh.
Good night. Sleep well.
Here we were, 300 or 400 miles into the heart of Yugoslavia. And there on the little table was the day-old London Times and the half-smoked pack of American cigarettes I'd bought in the Paris nightclub. I began connecting everything I looked at with the economy of Europe. Was it an export? From whom? To where? How was it paid for? In what? I'd never been so observant in my life.
You know, Parker, few Europeans, let alone Americans, have any idea how many European homes were rubble at the end of the war. Unless we build faster than we did before the war, France won't be able to rehouse her population until 1956. Holland can do it by 1973. And it'll take Greece until the year 2093. The Greek government, by the way, has many other things to think about besides housing.
Belgrade, we arrive in Belgrade in 20 minutes.
These timber yards are one of the answers. Yugoslavia has the timber. You only have to look out of the window. But to cut it down, she must buy machinery from Britain and the United States. Now, ECE has asked the International Bank to look in on the deal and make dollars available to Yugoslavia for this. Now, I call that moving down the road of international cooperation.
And it was then that I caught sight of the broad Danube, more muddy green than blue. During the stop at Belgrade and for miles afterwards, I sat alone in my compartment, and 100 thoughts crowded my mind. Here was a subject which 3 days ago was as far from me as the moon, and now it was as near as my own fireside. I realized that I was part of it. This commission in Geneva seemed to touch on everything. I began to get the idea. ECE represented something that got things done. In the midst of all the conflicting interests, the many crossing roads, it represented a junction where people come together. A junction in Europe. We crossed the Bulgarian frontier at Tsaribrod. All day we ran through farmlands with a stop at Sofia, the capital.
Say, you must drink some of this rakia. It's a local brew. The only thing stronger is atomic energy. Anyway, what do we got to lose? It's our last night aboard.
Now, that's a fine idea. I'm going to give you a toast. I raise my glass to ECE.
Well, I'll join you in that. This is as good a setting as any. Bulgarian rakia in an Italian glass.
Yeah, drunk by an American and an Englishman.
In a French coach.
In a train on its way to Turkey.
That's okay. Here's to ECE.
ECE. It was early morning. I pushed up the blind. It took me a moment to realize. I was looking across the Sea of Marmara, looking at Asia. We had crossed a continent. And maybe I thought, if man can be as wise as he is bold, we can go further and build a bridge across the gap that divides our world today. For that surely is the end to which we travel. When we got down, the platform was bedlam. I turned to my friend, and we shook hands.
It's been swell, Parker. Say, you said you're in radio, didn't you? Why don't you look me up in Geneva sometime? We'll put together a program on ECE.
Now, that's a good idea. I'll do that.
What's that you say?
I said I'll do that.
Well, this, what you've just been hearing, this was the program.
Today's UN story, Paris to Istanbul Express, as told by Mr. Gibson Parker, was produced by United Nations Radio.
United Nations Radio presents Gene Lockhart, star of the Broadway hit Death of a Salesman, and Marcia Hunt, featured in The Devil's Disciple in The Doctor and Magdalena.
Victor. Victor, wake up.
Is he coughing again?
No, I'm coughing for him.
I don't like that cough.
What? An old friend like that cough? How would we know it was Victor without the cough?
The Doctor and Magdalena by Howard Rodman, the fourth in a special series of dramatic programs produced by United Nations Radio. Gene Lockhart will be heard as the Doctor and Marcia Hunt as Magdalena. Mr. Gene Lockhart.
Thank you. In this story, I play the role of a doctor working on the United Nations campaign against tuberculosis. This campaign is no play, although you will hear about it in our play. It is, in fact, a deadly serious fight. Some of the organizations concerned in this fight have unfamiliar names, like the World Health Organization of the United Nations, or the Danish Red Cross, or UNICEF, the United Nations International Children's Emergency Fund. But don't be misled. The heart of the story is not unfamiliar, for the core of the fight against tuberculosis is people. And this is a story of people and their will to live. I came across the story of Magdalena and young Victor while I was working for the United Nations in Italy. They came in, like thousands of other young students, to get their TB test. One thing the test didn't tell me, though, was that Magdalena and Victor were in love.
Hey, Lena! Magdalena!
I'm coming!
Hurry up! The devil.
Good morning, Carissimo.
We'll get a good morning from the sisters if we don't hurry to school.
I had an egg for breakfast.
Ah, eggs.
I ate it slowly. When is your egg?
Next week, I think.
How's your family?
In good health. How's your family?
Well, last night my father was angry.
What did he break?
The fish bowl this time. The poor fish lay on the floor, opening their mouths and closing their mouths and trying to breathe. Poor little goldfish, they'll die now.
You must put them into a little salt water.
When we're married, you mustn't break things.
It was an ugly fish bowl anyway.
You can shout, but you must not break things.
I'll do as I please.
You can't do that.
Yes, I can.
That's not a good marriage.
You'll see what I can do.
Victor. Victor. Are you all right now?
Don't make me shout.
You're shouting now.
All right.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't your fault.
What makes you cough like that?
I don't know. I've always had it. Maybe from my parents.
When we're married, will you be kind to me?
Kinder than anyone has been to anyone.
Oh, that's good. That is true marriage. Victor, this thing we have, is it true love?
Don't you know?
I'm asking you.
It is true.
Then I'm glad. Carissimo, how many children?
3.
One of them must be a girl. Do you agree?
What a warm hand you have.
Squeeze it.
I'll hurt you.
Squeeze. Harder.
I'll hurt you.
Harder, don't talk.
Doesn't it hurt?
Sometimes. Only when a thing hurts, you know it's real. The bell! Race! Race, or we'll be late!
Last one to school is a bedbug.
Victor! Victor!
Go on. Don't wait for me. You'll be late.
Victor!
The devil. What a life. Just like the goldfish on the floor.
Are the cards nearly finished?
In a minute, Doctor.
Your sister.
Good morning, Doctor. We can bring the children down from their classrooms whenever you want them.
Good. We're almost ready here.
Do you have any special instructions for me, Doctor?
Yes, sister. Divide the children into 2 groups. First, send me the little ones, the ones under 12. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to explain to them very carefully, before they start from their classrooms, that what we do here is merely to put a little patch on their chest. It doesn't hurt.
I understand. Do you want their shirts off?
No, not off, just open. It's a little cold in here.
We do the best we can, Doctor. It's cold all over the country these days.
I understand, sister. I'm not criticizing. Now, for the older ones, have them roll up the sleeve on the right arm, just as far as the elbow. Over 12, we make an injection on the forearm.
I see. Do you want the teachers to come with them?
No, only for the little ones.
Very good.
It'll be helpful, sister, if, as they come in, the teachers will call off their names. Then the young lady here can hand the child's card to the nurse, and she can make the necessary remarks while I give the tuberculin.
I shall instruct them.
Oh, better send the young ones down in small groups, so they can all be in the room at once. When they wait out in the hall, they get frightened.
I admire your organization, Doctor. You think of everything.
Oh, we've done 20 million tests. Why not? Oh, yes, sister. This Friday, if you'll arrange for the check examination, we'll be ready to give the vaccination itself to those who need it.
We'll be ready for you, Doctor, Friday. The cards are all finished, Doctor.
Fine. Thank you. And now, sister, if we may get started.
At once. Good morning, Doctor, and thank you.
And thank you for your cooperation. Cold in here, Well, what can we do? Only what we can. Ah, here they are. Come in, little ones. Come in. Come in.
Hurry up!
I'm coming. Why do you keep whistling if it makes you cough?
I like to whistle.
Oh, you're so stubborn.
Do you want to stand here talking, or do you want to go to school?
My sister Olivia's getting married. It's finally arranged. They're going to live with us till they can find a place, and then they'll move. I'm going to move out into the big room and sleep on the couch. Victor, I won't be able to see your window anymore when I go to sleep. All you can see from the front window is the butcher shop.
The place where they stuck you with the needle, under the bandage, is yours swollen?
No. Last night they were fooling with me. First everybody had to drink to Olivia and Paolo. Then they drank to you and me. How they laughed. I tell you, my face was so hot.
Did you look underneath your bandage yet?
No. Why should I?
I did this morning. It was all swollen and red. Big bump under there.
Well, that's the way they all are.
Take a look at yours.
Well, wait a minute. Now, don't you look. Don't!
Why did you cover it up again so fast?
It's all red and swollen, just like yours.
Then let me see it.
I don't have to. I told you, it's the same thing.
You're lying.
What does it mean if yours is red like that?
It means you have consumption, of course. I knew it for a long time. Sometimes I cough blood, but I don't tell anybody.
Stop whistling!
You better fall in love with somebody else. I'll probably die.
Don't say such things.
It's not my fault. I didn't make it happen. Come on, we'll be late.
Victor, where are you, Victor? Maria.
Alberto, the boy is at the hospital.
I forgot. I was trying to wake him.
Every morning you wake up the same way.
What if I do?
Breakfast is ready.
What did I do with my shoes?
Under the bed where you left them.
Huh? Oh, yeah. I've got them.
You look so tired.
All night long I dream I'm running, or I fight. I dream about the boy. Boy is caught. I grab him. We run together, hand in hand. Then it gets hold of him again. I fight. We run. Maria, listen how quiet it is.
It's always quiet in the morning like this.
Terrible thing. I must be a bad father. I miss the coughing.
Come on, you'll be late to work.
I'm coming.
Sit down.
Such silence.
Drink your coffee.
When do you cry?
When you're running. I sit at the window and look at the dark sky and weep. I think over the boy's whole life. War.
Mussolini. May his bones rot in hell. Such silence.
Girl!
Pardon?
Where are you going?
But
Out until the hour. Do you have a pass?
No.
Come over here. Whom do you wish to visit?
Xenophonte Victor.
Relative?
A friend.
Let me see. Xenophonte. Victor Xenophonte, room 203. What's your name?
Piso Magdalena. Does it say how he is?
Ask the doctor. Here. When the time comes, show this pass to the man at the stairway.
Thank you.
Go sit down on the bench over there. Be quiet. Go.
Scusa.
It is done. You're waiting to see your mama?
No.
Your papa, perhaps?
No.
Pardon an old man. Who are you waiting to see?
Victor.
Ah, Victor. I'm waiting to see my nephew, my sister's son. It's a shame how they make you wait. Scusa, who is Victor?
He is my beloved.
He is very sick?
He has consumption.
A terrible thing.
I cannot get sick. They came to the school and gave me a vaccination so I won't get sick. It is not fair. I should not be separated from him like that. If he is sick, I should be sick.
We travel as we must. Each ticket is punched for a different station.
Lovers travel side by side.
In a different world, perhaps, not on this one.
How terrible it is.
A cold world, gray mornings and painful air to breathe. I have lived through 3 wars, and they talk about a 4th. Oh, the devil.
If I cannot be married to the one I love, I shall never be married. As for the 3 children, they will never be born.
Pain and sorrow. The 4th war will set us all free. High up in the sky in a flash. Dead before we can hear the sound.
No, we have not lived yet. No.
I have lived too much.
It will be beautiful. Each morning will be so beautiful, tears of joy will come to my eyes. It will be so.
You can believe that?
Yes, yes. And for that, Victor must live.
Girl, I told you, be quiet. This is a hospital.
Victor must live.
Honestly, Mama. Honestly, I don't cough like that so often anymore.
I know, dear. Are you comfortable in this bed?
Yes. It's very pleasant here, Mama. The doctor is very nice, the nurse is kind, and the food is good.
Rest and be quiet and get well. Every morning I go to talk to the Virgin and I light a candle for you. Give me your hand. Oh, child, how we miss you.
I'll be home soon, Mama.
Of course you will.
Where's Papa today?
He'll be here later.
Lena was here this morning.
She's a good child, that one. She comes to the house every day. She talks to me. She helps me out. A real daughter.
I made a good pick, huh, Mama?
Time to go home.
Tell Lena to come tomorrow, Mama.
I won't need to. Be good, Victor. Do what the doctor tells you.
I do, Mama.
Of course. Goodbye, Victor. Alberto, sit down. Supper is ready.
I'm not very hungry.
Eat anyway.
All right. Time for eating. I eat.
Alberto?
Huh?
We must have more children.
He was very cheerful today when I saw him. He didn't cough so much. He was livelier.
If there were more children...
Who are you to give him up?
Don't fool yourself. Every time I see him, he gets weaker and weaker.
Not so.
It is so. In a barrel of wine, who minds if someone takes a glass or two away? But in a small glass of wine, every sip is too precious. Don't cry.
I'm like a woman. My whole will is broken.
Don't cry. What is this? Is death a stranger? Is this the first child we've lost? How many other mothers have I seen wailing for a dead child? Were you a soldier without seeing death?
Why did this happen to us? Why?
It doesn't happen to us. It happens to the whole world.
I don't care about the world.
You don't care about the world? Then it will continue to kill your children.
Et omnes qui vivit et credit in me non moritur.
Lena? Lena, I want to talk to you.
What, Mama?
Come from that window. Come look at me while I talk.
What, Mama?
You're not a little child, Lena. You're almost a woman.
I feel so empty inside.
What can I say to you?
When we were 6 years old, we used to play together.
I remember.
Through this window, I can see the window of his house. This is where I used to sit at night until the lights went out there. Then I used to go to sleep. Not before.
What can I say to you?
Nothing, Mama.
Lena, don't make us unhappy.
Mama, what have I got to take his place? Oh, Mama, how do you live in a world like this? I want you to help me.
Yes?
You must undo what you did.
What have I done?
Take back this terrible cure you have given me. Let me be with him.
Now, you must tell me what it is. Calmly, child, calmly.
It's Victor.
Which Victor?
My Victor. Xenophante Victor.
Xenophante?
You gave him the test. You sent him to the hospital.
All right, that's what I did to Victor. I sent him to the hospital. But what have I done to you?
You gave me the vaccination. He's dead. Why did you separate us?
Oh, now I see.
We were to have 3 children. 1 child a girl. Oh, I hate his parents.
Why do you feel this?
They gave it to him. They passed this on to him. They took him away from me.
This thing, tuberculosis, it's not passed on by the parents. It's passed on by the state of the world.
It's their fault.
Fault? Did he have enough to eat? Were his clothes warm? Did he get enough sunlight? These things? Tuberculosis is a symptom of deeper troubles. But first, we must arrest the symptom. What is your name?
Piso Magdalena.
Listen, Magdalena Piso. You'll fall in love again. You'll marry, and you'll bring children into the world.
No, not this kind of a world.
No, you can shout no till the walls ring, but you'll do it. This pessimism in you will die, but you will live, and your children will live. You think of Victor, who used to cough every morning. It wasn't just Victor. All over the world, every year, 5 million people die of tuberculosis, and mostly young people. You think of your Victor, but the men in the laboratories thought of 5 million people a year, and that's why your children will live. The vaccine was invented in France, but is it only for French children? No, this is for the whole world of children. Come in, little ones, come in, come in. Yes, French children and Austrian children and Czechoslovakian children. Take off your shirt, child. And young people of Finland, Greece, and India, of Hungary, Mexico, Italy, and Poland, of Yugoslavia, Pakistan, and Denmark, of Ecuador, Lebanon, Egypt. What's your name, little one? All right, then, whisper in my ear. Giovanni. Giovanni, that's a nice name. Now, don't be frightened. You see, Magdalena, what's the sense of asking, if you bring children into the world like this, will it be your fault? This is a world enemy, and you have to fight a world fight. There, little one. Did that hurt? Oh, what a brave little fellow, not a sound. There, now, you're through. All right, come here, next. You're next. No. Now, no tears, no tears. Take off your blouse. You see, Magdalena Piso, this is the hope. We are fighting the world fight. Vaccinations by the 100 million. You see this child here? How he struggles. But I must give him the vaccine anyhow. And now he'll be all right. So run along now. Now, next, you little boy, come here. Now, don't be frightened. Oh, you're trembling. All right, now look. You sit on this nice girl's lap.
Hello.
Now, Magdalena Piso, now tell me this is no kind of world to bring children into.
He is nice, isn't he?
Isn't he? You see, Magdalena, if the world isn't good enough to live in, we'll make it better. Why, we make it better every day, like this. Now, little one, you see how foolish it is to worry? The injection's all finished. So go, child, and run out into this world we're trying so hard to make good for you. Run, and shout, and play. Magdalena?
Yes, Doctor.
Some we cannot save.
I understand. It's all right, Doctor. I will learn to live again.
This is Gene Lockhart speaking. Those of us who live in industrially developed countries are fortunate that we are able to take for granted the protection against common diseases that our society provides. But in vast areas of the world, as a matter of fact, areas inhabited by the great majority of the Earth's population, the desperate and immediate need is not only for health tests and vaccinations, but for basic necessities such as food, clothing, and shelter. In a world with too little food and shelter to go around, sick people cannot produce enough to eat, and in turn they become weaker and more disease-ridden. This vicious circle is the challenge today facing all the United Nations. They are meeting that challenge. In a new 5-year program planned by WHO and the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, at least 10 million acres of agricultural land now being poorly worked by undernourished people will be developed. The United Nations is thus not only arresting preventable disease among young people like Victor and Magdalena, it is striking at the roots of disease buried deep in poverty, in destruction, and in war.
United Nations Radio has brought you The Doctor and Magdalena, with the film and stage stars Gene Lockhart as the Doctor and Marcia Hunt as Magdalena. Peter Fernandez was heard as Victor, with Catherine Rott as his mother, Joseph DeSantis as his father. Others in the cast included Adelaide Klein, Hester Sondergaard, Bryna Rayburn, Frank Silvera, and Edward Latimer. Howard Rodman wrote the story based on actual United Nations files. Charles Paul conducted and adapted the music from Ravel's Quartet in F. Mava Moore directed the program. The Doctor and Magdalena was produced by Gerald Keane of United Nations Radio.
By recording, the radio divisions of UNESCO and the United Nations present Sir Laurence Olivier in Letter from Father.
If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die?
Recognizing that the inherent dignity and the equal rights of all members of the human family are the foundations of freedom, justice, and peace, the General Assembly of the United Nations, on December 10, 1948, proclaimed the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. To mark this anniversary, United Nations Radio and UNESCO bring you Sir Laurence Olivier in Letter from Father.
It is 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock in the morning, December the 10th. An hour ago, I sat beside your mother. She said, "You look so tired. Why don't you go home and rest?" Then she was rigid with pain again. She gripped my hand. Her nails cut into my palm. The moment passed, and her voice was soft. "It will be easier if you're not here. The doctor will call you." Now it is 1 o'clock on the morning of what will be your birthday. And I'm writing to you, even though I cannot yet put a greeting on my letter. I cannot yet start with, "My dear son," or "My dear daughter." I must wait. And it will be many years, too, before you read my letter. Perhaps by then there will be no cause to read it. I shall be happy if that should be. But for now, I cannot let my thoughts be dulled by hope. I am writing in the stillness of our home. Around me are all the things we know so well, the things you will grow to know. The comfortable and the uncomfortable chairs, The clock which always gains 6 minutes a week. The resolutions about tidiness and the failures to keep them. And the garden where I struggle with vegetables and your mother succeeds with flowers. This will be your home. In it you will find love. Always I shall strive for your security and freedom for you to grow in mind and body. For the world beyond your home I can give no promise. This will be your birthday. But it is not yours alone. As life begins for you, so does it for many thousands of others in many lands, with skins of darkest black to fairest white, with features cast in many forms, with creeds, customs, talents, and tongues varied beyond any single understanding. None of those with whom you share this birthday will be quite like you, save in one thing. You are all human beings. You are all endowed with reason and with conscience. You are all born equally worthy of life and with a right to live it fully in dignity and freedom according to your ability. These are simple words. So simple that men often neglect their meaning. It is so easy to turn away, to call them sentimental, to dismiss them as pious ideals, hollow as an echo. It is so easy to take refuge in indifference, so comfortable to cover callousness with talk of realism. That there are those who turn away, who tolerate the denial of human dignity, is to the shame of all. There is no need here to recall the excesses of man's inhumanity. No need to speak of monstrous tortures turning men into fragile shadows. No need to speak of millions herded to death behind barbed wire, their withered bodies tipped like refuse into pits. These are horrors that have always brought retribution upon those who inflict them. No. I would rather speak of less appalling things, of the insidious worms of inhumanity which feed upon us in silence and obscurity, slowly destroying our claim to civilization as surely as termites will destroy a pillar of wood. I visited an island in the Pacific once. In the street of the small town one day, I was walking behind a man in a white tropic suit, cleaned and pressed. Just as he passed a shop, someone ran from its doorway and collided with him. He staggered a pace or two, he recovered his balance, then shouted, "What do you think you're doing?" The other did not answer. He stood there, motionless, his eyes cast down fearfully. Passers-by stopped to stare at him, an islander, wearing no more than a strip of colored cloth about his hips, and a string of small shells about his neck. "Answer me!" came the demand. The islander then mumbled an apology, but it was not accepted. The man in the tropic suit grabbed him by the shoulder, ripped the string from his neck, and pushed him to the ground. Slowly the islander gathered the broken, scattered shells. Then he rose and without a word or a glance moved away into the crowd. The fine white dust of the road clung in smears to his dark skin. No blood flowed there. No punishable crime was committed. Yet who suffered the greater degradation, the islander humiliated before his fellows, or the one who allowed the worm of prejudice to bore deeper still into his heart and mind? At another time, in a great European city, I saw a little girl. Her cheeks were colorless. Her thin, frail body was covered with only a faded cotton dress. Old open sandals were fastened to her dirty little feet with string. I saw her alone in a busy street, leaning against the entrance window of a restaurant, with one foot on the pavement and the other on the doorstep. Through the door came the odors of fine cooking. In the window, inches from her head, were baskets filled with fruit, heavy bunches of grapes, pears with gleaming light yellow skins, rich red apples, oranges. Yet there was more than the sheet of glass between the child and that display, and more than a doorway between her and the shining silverware, the starched linen, and the food inside. Somehow she seemed to know this, though it is impossible to tell her thoughts. Her expression indicated nothing. There was neither joy nor sorrow, hope nor despair on that old young face. Even when a waiter in an immaculate apron came through the door and ordered her away, there was no change, no sign that she wanted to stay, no sign that she knew where next to go. As I watched her merge with the crowd in the street, she looked smaller than any child I've ever seen. She could not have been more alone had she walked in the isolation of some wide, wild desert. No blood flowed there. No punishable crime was committed. Yet everyone in that street, that city, that land, everyone in this world was guilty. The worm of indifference was in us all. Indifference to that little girl's claim to life as a human being. Indifference to her right to a home, health, and protection. I hesitate to continue. Is it possible to encompass in words the whole of our inhumanity? Should I speak, too, of those denied the right to work, or the just rewards of work? Of those condemned to ignorance and its bitter fruit because there are none to teach them? Of those who cannot even call a land their own? To think on these things alone is to be seized by fury or dismay. Happily, however, they are not the whole picture, and you would be right to accuse me of distortion if I were to suggest that they were. The picture also contains the promise of a future, the promise that enables me to hope that one day my words may seem to you remote and strange. Noble minds in many ages have held this promise before us, and despite all, it is our own age which gives the greatest hope of its fulfillment. Men's minds today are changing. For the first time, we are beginning to think of the lives not simply of our own family or nation or race, but of all people everywhere, whether they be black, yellow, or white, or whether their homes are towers of steel and glass or huts of bark and straw. The distinctions that have divided men for so long are crumbling. They must continue to crumble till the last remaining fragments are ground to dust by the concerted will of all. On this very day, in 1948, this new promise found its finest expression in a declaration by the assembled representatives of more than 50 nations. Born of the destruction of war and the agony of millions, it is yet a declaration that denies that blood and tyranny must forever remain the spur. Too often has our progress awaited the stimulus of battle. Too often has the imminence of death been the motivation of life. Now, at last, we have an affirmation of faith in life itself. Still, it remains a promise. Between the promise and the fulfillment lies the struggle. Are you wondering why I say all this and what it is I expect of you? I expect nothing. I hope you will grow to be a wise and civilized person, free of all hate, meanness, and prejudice. But I shall not impose my hope upon you. If you wish it, I shall gladly share what knowledge and experience I have with you. But the decisions and the responsibilities will always be yours. Nevertheless, I cannot finish without one word of warning. Between the promise and the fulfillment lies the struggle. We have the ways and the means to win that struggle. What we too often lack is the will. Too often, we are afraid. Fear is the fertile soil which nurtures the bigot and the demagogue. To tolerate their growth, to withhold your defiance, is to assure their final domination. Hello. Yes, speaking. Is that you, Doctor? Yeah? Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good night. You are with us now. Your life has started. In the morning, I shall see you for the first time. And for the first time, too, at this moment, I know to whom I have been writing. I can add the greeting I've been waiting for. And I can put down my pen with welcome and good night to you, my son.
You have just heard Sir Laurence Olivier in Letter from Father, presented by UNESCO and United Nations Radio to mark the day the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was proclaimed, December 10th, 1948. We wish to thank the BBC for recording Sir Laurence in Glasgow, Scotland. Letter from Father was written by Ken Pittendry and produced by Michael Hayward of United Nations Radio.
United Nations Radio now presents the distinguished actor Mr. Albert Decker in a special dramatic performance, The Story of Nicholas Mititic.
In a few moments, I shall be speaking to you as Nicholas Mititic, a refugee from Camp Pasch on the outskirts of Salzburg in Austria. You may like to hear a short extract of a broadcast Mititic himself recorded a short while ago, as it may help to bring you nearer to his personality and character. He speaks in French, as he did not know English, but I shall translate as we go along.
Mon moral est très bon. Peut-être c'est ma voix qui me tienne. Peut-être c'est mon mentalité, mon caractère est tel que je ne prends jamais une chose de très mauvaise côté. Je pense toujours
My morale is
temps
good,
quand sera mieux.
because I have faith,
Que cette espérance
because I never see the worst side of things. I always think there will be better times ahead. I have read about people in my situation who thought of suicide. I never. I have reconciled myself with my fate. It is difficult sometimes, but I
Je la
live.
supporte. Je ne la supporte pas facilement, mais quand même, je la supporte et je vis.
United Nations Radio, in cooperation with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, presents Albert Decker as Mititic.
Your name?
Nicholas Mititic,
Age?
38,
Profession?
lawyer,
Position in your former country?
district commissioner.
Health?
Good.
And any other qualifications?
I speak 4 languages. My name is Mititic, Nicholas Mititic. It is written on the cover of many files, on the papers inside these files. Name, age, profession, health, personal history. And these files rest in consulates, in immigration offices, and with people who have been trying to help me, in many filing cabinets marked under the letter M. There my name is just another case. A case perhaps more difficult to solve than others. But in the country where I come from, the name Mititic stood for something, at least in the province and in the small town where I was born. For centuries, there had always been a Mititic to attach his name to some work for our people. I was brought up, having it hammered into me that I had to live up to the family tradition. In fact, after I completed my studies, I entered the government service, and when I was 30, was appointed district commissioner in our town. I was a man with a solid career, who could one day hope to hold high positions. I married, bought a home, had servants. My wife and I were happy. Perhaps not so happy as I thought we were at the time. But after all these years, I don't know. She, like my life in my hometown, is a vision of the past, a picture seen in a cracked mirror. The world in which I lived, which had grown on traditions hundreds of years old, which from my boyhood I saw as an order of society as natural as leaves on a tree, exists no more, except in the memories of those who remember. And with this world has gone the man Mititic, whose name meant something. Now it is a name written in indelible ink on a gray piece of cardboard which I have nailed on the door of my room. There it has been for the best part of the last 13 years. My room has one window and wooden walls. It is 9 by 12 feet. There is an iron bed, a cupboard closed with a curtain, a small wooden table, one chair, and a little black stove. On this black stove, I have a water kettle. I have a teapot and 2 cups in case there is a visitor. I have 1 plate, 3 spoons, a fork and 2 knives. An alarm clock stands on the wooden table. On the wall hangs a calendar, witness of time passing. I am a man who has to live on charity, on 300 shillings a month, Austrian shillings, that is, or about $12. With this, I pay my food, my cigarettes, and such other things as I may need. I have not to pay for light, for coal, or for rent of the room. From my window, I see rows of other barracks. Above the black roofs, and the gray smoke curling from the chimneys, I can see the mountains, and to the east, the spires of the churches and the dome of the Cathedral of Salzburg not far away. My neighbors are old people, invalids, middle-aged men and women, and their children. Often I think, what are we but the stragglers of an army that passed and has gone? An army of men and women who have found what they needed, a place to live decently, a job, and a home. But I have not found that. I am a man who can call nothing his own but his name and his memories. Would I, knowing what I now know, would I still take the decision I took that June day in 1945? The answer is yes. Yes. It was not the ambitious district commissioner thinking of his career who made the decision, but a man who had changed. I had gone through the war, fighting, killing, and seeing my brothers die, living the nightmare of attack, retreat, defeat, a hunted animal, and finally a prisoner in a cage. It was in 1941 that I was made a prisoner of war. I emerged from the days of soldiering and the first bewilderment of the captured man. Even in the suffering of physical discomforts and the anxieties of exile, the prisoner of war lives on hope. He has time to think. He sees his country no longer from within, beheld from the threshold of his ambition. He sees it more clearly as an expression of a way of life that is inherently good, but which can and must be improved. The future is not a stretch of time in which he plays above all a part for his own benefit. It is a deep wave that must carry better things forward for himself and for all the others who are his people. That was the frame of mind in which I was when war came to an end. The end of the war affected us prisoners in different ways. There were those who went wild with rejoicing. and those who suddenly came to realize that the old traditions in our countries were swept away for new ideas and methods, for a way of life we could not accept. What to do? This was the crucial and personal question which each of us had to answer. I gave it that day in June 1945, when we left our prisoner of war camp and were taken to a place near the border where we faced a group of officers from our own country, wearing uniforms we did not know. One of them spoke to us.
Your country wants you back. Your friends wait for you.
From where we stood, we could see the land stretching out toward the mountains, some 30 miles away, the mountains of our country. It was a clear day with a warm sun, yet there was snow on the peaks, and we knew that behind those mountains were the villages and towns where our own people lived, our wives and children. We stood in silence. No man asked his neighbor what he was going to do. No friend took counsel from his friend.
Your own country gives you the chance of a new start.
But when the officer stopped speaking, I remained silent. This was the moment of decision. The man who did not go back now would never see his family again. Not his wife, not his children, not his father, not his mother. I refused to return, and so did the others. We had to make this sacrifice to give deeper meaning to everything in which we believed.
Your name?
Nicholas Mititic.
Age?
38.
Profession?
Lawyer.
Position in your former country?
District Commissioner.
Health?
Good.
Any other qualifications?
I speak 4 languages. My name goes into a file. My personal history is written down. Resettlement officers come from many countries, and always the same procedure.
Your name?
Nicholas Mititic.
Age?
39.
Name?
Nicholas Mititic.
Age?
40.
Name?
Nicholas Mititic.
Age?
41. And at the end of every interview...
Sorry, but we don't need lawyers.
But I am ready to do anything. Work in a shop, clean offices, be a messenger boy, anything.
Sorry, but we cannot help you. Next, please.
Yes, the farmers, the shoemakers, the road workers, the foresters, the mechanics, provided they were strong in body and limb, could go. Every day some of them parted, and we stood around wishing them Godspeed, thinking one day we shall be lucky. If I had seen more clearly in myself, recognized realities, maybe I would have known then that my future was not over the seas. But hope, false hope, illusions can be as destroying as drugs. They befog the mind, rob you of your judgment. The shock came when I heard the death of my wife, my mother, father. For long there had been no news. Then a Red Cross card brought the tidings. Now I was truly alone, but I lived. And I still had to make something of this life. I must get away from this camp. For days I walked about thinking. The road that had brought me so far had abruptly ended. Everything I had prepared myself for, everything I had learned, everything I knew could help me no longer. I was standing in front of an abyss with no bridge in sight. I had tried to make some money by helping to dig ditches, build roads. I was not strong enough to become a manual laborer. I was not clever enough with my hands to become a mechanic. What could I do? Perhaps someday one country would be needing a tailor. I reckoned without fate. But first, I must tell you about Julia. It was in May 1952 that I saw her for the first time. I was sitting in front of my barrack with Ravotich, listening to Vedorov play on his guitar. Dusk was falling. In the far-off courtyard, some children were still playing, but most had gone to bed. A few other families sat out in the open. And then I saw the girl. She was wearing a long gray coat and a white blouse that made a pleasant contrast with her tanned skin and her fair hair. She looked not more than 18, although, as I learned later, she was 20. She came toward us, and Ravotich got up, his face beaming. He introduced her as his fiancée. Something very strange happened to me. Like the others, I rose to greet her. But as she and Ravotich walked away, it was as if all my loneliness and all the uselessness of my life was burning deep inside me, like being focused by a magic lens on one point. I think I must have fallen in love with her straight away. Ravotich told me her story a few days later. She had come from her country 2 months earlier. He had known her in his village as a little girl. Now they planned to go to Canada together. I saw much of Julia the following weeks. Ravotich and I were good friends. He lived in a room next to mine. It was natural, therefore, that we should be together during the evenings. Sometimes he and I went to the community hall where Julia had started to train a choir. She had been a teacher, and she herself had a pretty voice. I don't think either Julia or Ravotich noticed my feelings at this time. I did not want them to. This was a burden I had to carry alone. It would have been wrong to complicate their lives. Ravotich had a future, and I had none. Not yet. But we reckoned without fate. One day the social worker came excitedly to see Ravotich. She brought with her his final papers for the visa, the tickets for his journey, the letters of introduction to his sponsor in Canada. A visa can be the key to a new life. It can also be the source of a deep conflict. In some families, it marks the moment of joyful packing. In others, it causes a heart-burning search. All can go except the child, except the father, except the grandmother, because of bad eyesight, a weak heart, a spot on the lung, an illness, described in the regulations as reasons for barring their entry. The family asks themselves, will they leave the one behind, or will they all stay and forego their chance? The situation was not so bad for Ravotich. He was not yet married to Julia. There was no reason why Julia should not join him later, after she had spent the minimum 2 years that have to be spent waiting in a camp before the visa can be granted. And so Ravotich went. After he had gone, Julia and I continued to see each other. Because she was lonely, perhaps, she would come and mend my socks and clothes for me. cook my dinner, spend some evenings with me. Until then, my meals had been very simple. Pour water into a kettle, boil the water, make tea, buy a loaf of bread, a piece of butter, breakfast, lunch, dinner. But now, Julia brought order into my life and companionship and the challenge of another mind. Understand me, I loved Julia, but I tried to hide my feelings. I was much older than she, and she was the girl of my friend. Yet in Julia herself, a kind of affection grew, a gentleness towards someone who maybe gave her a feeling of security. She would linger by my side, touch my hand, and one night she stayed. In a camp where men and women feel cut off from the rest of the world, where there is so little to which one can cling, the presence of a friend takes the place of everything, all the absent ones, all the memories of the past.
Name?
Nicholas Mititic.
Age?
48.
Profession?
Tailor.
Through this door, please. The doctor will see you.
The humming of an X-ray machine.
Come back in 2 days' time.
And 2 days later...
Sorry, but you have a patch on the lung. No visa.
I could have asked of Julia the sacrifice I had no right to accept. She would have stayed with me, married me, even to living years and years in this camp. But what would her love have become if on it she would have to blame later the loss of her youth and of her future? What I did is quickly told. I wrote to Ravitich. I told him the truth of what had happened. I implored him to do what he could for Julia, to be her sponsor, so that she might receive a visa. 6 months later, the visa came. She left Camp Pash for Canada. The photograph of her marriage is on the wall of my room. I read somewhere that when the spirit of a man dies, his body withers. A few weeks after Julia had gone, I had my first heart attack. Then the signs of a crippling rheumatism appeared. I was sent to a sanatorium. My heart got better, but the rheumatism worsened. When I returned to the camp, I was a cripple who needed 2 sticks to walk. I was broken in body and in mind. There is not much I can say about the time passing in the camp. I cared too little to notice anything going on around me, but somewhere in my subconscious, not everything had gone dead. It was Christmas 1955 when I attended service at our church, surrounded by other people like myself, when I became aware of a great peace, a contentment almost, because I was allowed to worship, to be present at the great mystery of religion, and to receive the gift of this chant and music. Like in an illuminated book of hours, it was suddenly revealed to me that life was not only the power to achieve, but the blessing of thinking, speaking, and being at one with others. It was not waiting for death, as I believed, but the growing awareness of all the thoughts in one's heart. Life is like the icon of the Holy Trinity: love, faith, and charity. And love is the greatest of them all. I did not at once return to life. The moment of peace passed, and again I was plunged in gloom and bitterness. Yet times returned when I could smile again and laugh. Some weeks later, the social worker came to my room for a long chat. She came to tell me that our camp had been adopted by people in England and in Belgium. They wanted someone to tell them about the needs in the camp and to advise them how they could best help. They wanted a refugee to do this, and the social worker asked whether I would do it. I accepted. Until now, I had been concerned with my own fate only. Every thought of mine, every feeling, had been about the man Mititic. Now I had to learn about the worries and the anxieties of others, to listen to their histories and experiences, and try to gain their confidence. It was at this time that the churches, the Jews, the Catholics, and Protestants, together with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, began working on a plan to help all the families living in the camp. In many cases, I served as a go-between for the counselors and the families. In others, I had to try and convince the counselors that the plans of my friends were really based on serious thinking. As our old Archbishop Stephan once said, "Those who believe will be stopped by nothing. But there are those also faint of heart, who only love can help." Yes, when I think of some in the camp, it seems that there is no love strong enough to reach out and pull them back into life. I can see them passing before my window, beards unshaven, eyes troubled with drink, walking from their room to the canteen, and from the canteen back to their room. They are those who have shut their hearts because when everything failed, they were too afraid to go on living, but were too frightened to die. These men and women for whom forgetting is the only consolation, there is perhaps no other way to be helped than by letting them look at someone who might be more miserable even than they.
How can you talk of a future? You, a cripple, a useless fellow.
Yes, perhaps there is nothing for me. But you are not crippled. You could still try. And sometimes they laugh. Sometimes they go away silent. May God help them in their loneliness. We have been told that if we get enough help, that the camp could disappear by next year. And I hope for a small flat with simple furniture, a balcony, a bathroom, in one of the new houses built by the United Nations. I shall take with me my icon of the Holy Trinity, the prayer book my father gave me, the photograph of Julia, and all the letters I have received from friends, those who have left the camp and those who helped us. My life in the camp will then be over, a life that began 13 years ago when I gazed over the mountains and made my decision to stand by the things in which I believed. Nicholas Mititic died early in December 1958, a few weeks before he could leave the camp. His bishop said of him, "He was a light amongst his people."
You have been listening to Albert Decker as Mititic. The program was produced by Gerald Keane and Eric Walters, text written by Stanley Wright, with songs and music recorded in refugee camps in different parts of Europe. This has been a presentation of United Nations Radio in cooperation with the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
United Nations Radio presents Beyond Reasonable Doubt.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, concerning this document, we have looked into the whole affair. We have consulted a battery of lawyers. We have searched the records for the last 200,000 years. We have pleasure in informing you that everything is as it should be. Everything is in order. Your title to the deed has been searched, examined, and established beyond reasonable doubt.
The story you are about to hear concerns law, how it began and why, how it developed and why. It also concerns society and how that began and developed. In short, you are about to hear the hand-in-glove and at times tongue-in-cheek account of the joint evolution of human history and human jurisprudence. Our purpose is to show that law and life go together, and that the rule of law is the rule of life, and that neither can exist without the other. The occasion for the program is a most lawful one, the 12th anniversary of the United Nations, an organization built upon a charter in which both law and history meet with compulsive destiny. Your narrator is Quentin Reynolds.
Beyond reasonable doubt. Well, now, the tale I am here to tell concerns many centuries, past, present, and future. I shall need corroborative evidence from eminent men in each. The future we have not been able to contact. But all those necessary from the past and the present have been approached, and all are willing. Gentlemen, will you come down or up, as the case may be? Gentlemen, please.
What a distinct pleasure to see you. And looking so well, too.
After you, my dear Hammurabi.
General Pompey, how good to see you, old chap.
Prince von Metternich, where have you been?
Ah, Cecil, my old friend. Socrates, I'm happy to see you so fit.
Is it fit to see me happy? Or are you happy to see me fit?
Same old Socrates, up to your old tricks, I say. Now, did you hear what he said? Did you hear what he told us?
Welcome, gentlemen. Please be seated. I shall call upon you all in historical order. Now for the story. It opens in a certain jungle clearing, somewhere in the third interglacial age. Somewhere in those cold, mist-filled centuries, a momentous event has happened. After uncounted years of wandering alone or in pairs, the species Homo has begun to live in families. The great original transition has been made. Man has abandoned the ways of solitude and has discovered the safety and security of life in society. He is about now to make another momentous discovery. Will Homo neanderthalensis Jr. step forward, please?
Homo neanderthalensis Jr., front and center, please.
According to the best available knowledge, sir, you were the very first, to have direct experience of what we now call the long arm of the law. Is that so?
That's right. The arm belonged to my old man, and there was a fist attached to it. That's how it all started, you might say.
Will you tell us how it happened?
Well, it was this way, see? There we were, in our cosy little jungle clearing There we were, just sitting around the fire, scratching ourselves. Pa and Ma and me, together with some of my brothers and sisters, whom Pa hadn't eaten yet. Pa used to get awful hungry in those days. The fourth glacier age was moving in, and it was getting really cold. Pa wanted the fire stoked up a bit, so he turned around to Ma and me and said,
"Good for nothing savages, sitting around here with your ugly, hairy faces, your low foreheads and beetle brows.
Why don't you stir yourselves a bit? Put a few more logs on the fire. Don't just sit there, scratching your repulsive hairy skins by the hour.
Oh, me?
Yes, you.
And Ma also?
Yes, your precious Ma, too.
Well, I like that.
Now, Paul, that's not a very nice thing to say. Mum and I may not be what you might call good lookers, but then you couldn't win no beauty prize yourself neither.
That's telling him, son. Look, Pa. There's a rhinoceros somewhere over there. Why don't you go and do some useful hunting instead? We ain't never eaten rhinoceros, or woolly mammoth, or bison, or auroch, or muskox.
Yes, Paul. Let's have some muskox.
What, with only stones and sticks? You know that's all we have to hunt with, idiot.
Oh, Paul.
I'm sick to death of nothing but vegetables. All those hazelnuts, beech nuts, sweet chestnuts, earth nuts, and acorns.
Yes, so am I. They stick in my teeth. Oh, Paul! Oh, Paul!
I see it's high time I planted the seeds of family order.
But, Paul! Oh, Paul!
High time I laid the foundation of social wisdom.
Oh, Paul!
Now, my dear, what would you like me to bring you home for dinner?
Oh, anything at all, Dux. Anything at all.
I'm glad you see it my way. And when I get back, I'll have a bit more to say on the subject of family law and order.
So that's how it was in those long-forgotten days when mankind took its first step toward the United Nations Charter, towards the realization that wherever there is society, there must be law. But now history stood on the threshold of another momentous event, an event which changed human life for all time and gave destiny a new direction. Mr. Citizen of Neolithic times, your big moment has arrived. Will you please come forward and tell us what happened?
As I recall it, the time was somewhere around 15,000 BC. As head of tribe, I permitted myself a few, shall we say, luxuries. I'd collected a few rather amiable wives. One day, one of them, whom I always regarded as being the brightest of the lot, came running towards me, brandishing some stalks of wheat.
Georgie!
Yes, dear.
Oh, look what I have here.
Give me 3 guesses. Oats.
Oh, George.
Barley, then.
No, George.
I've known all along, my dear. It's wheat.
Yes, George, but what kind of wheat?
Just good old health-giving wholesome wheat, full of vitamin B complex and riboflavin. As a friend of mine says, you can't hardly get that kind no more.
Oh, George, you're awful. This is not the plain old wild wheat like we've been reaping for centuries. This wheat I grew.
You did what?
I've made a discovery. I've invented agriculture.
With the coming of cultivation, humanity crashed the time barrier from prehistory into history. Families multiplied rapidly into tribes. Tribes grew into clans, and clans developed into races. Men ceased to wander and began to settle down. They multiplied and discovered themselves numerous. On the banks of the Nile, on the banks of the Euphrates and the Tigris, on the banks of the Indus and the Ganges, and on the banks of the Yangtze Cheng. Men took root as they had never taken root before. They started felling trees to make room for cities. They started exterminating wild beasts over great areas of the earth. They started building houses.
Oh!
And they started laying out city streets and pavements. And with the first cities in centuries that were still cool in the dawn of history, there came, as they had to, the first codes of civilization. Tribal taboos gave place to deliberate, planned legislation. Emperor Hammurabi, Your Majesty, tell us, sire, what you proclaimed in Babylon 4,000 years ago.
If a man practice brigandage and be captured, that man shall be put to death. If a man knock out a tooth of a man,
And then some 1,000 years later, from the land of Judea, came another, the Code of the Hebrews.
A man smiting a man, if he dies, shall surely die. A man smiting his father or his mother shall surely die.
And across the seas and the centuries in the land of Romulus and Remus, the law of the 12 tables.
If a man shall disable the limb of another man, his own limb shall be disabled.
And in the India of Sanskrit times, the divine Manu speaks.
Punishment rules all men. Punishment alone protects them. Punishment is watchful while they sleep. The wise know punishment to be justice.
And in the Greece of classic times, the wise Solon prays.
We humbly beg a blessing on our laws from mighty Jove, and honor and applause.
All the centuries of man have been applauding ever since. These were mankind's first codes of law, the first charters of cooperative conduct in the first civilized societies. Written on stone, rock, and papyrus, they stood as the first legible signposts on history's crossroads, pointing the way to the century of San Francisco and the United Nations. Laws in early times had one overriding purpose, social peace. But the need for a higher and wider conception of law was waiting around history's corner, in the Grecian city where the wise Solon had promulgated his laws. What did your tables of Athenian laws do, sir?
Well, among other things, I made it compulsory for citizens to take an active and direct part in the management of city affairs. This government by the demos, the people, brought about what I believe was history's very first example of democracy.
Thank you, Citizen Solon. And democracy brought with it a new conception of both the nature and the function of law in society. Citizen Aristogython, now, sir, it is your turn. Citizen Aristogython, I know you went through shall we say, embarrassing trial.
Yes.
But that is precisely what we need to recall. So would you be good enough to tell us how that rather unfortunate event took place in your life and what came of it?
Well, it was a rather pleasant, sunny day, and I was out looking for prospective clients. I was a lawyer. We used to be called sycophants. Your modern term is solicitor. The meaning is much the same. As I was saying, I was out looking for clients. Not an easy job, as you know, at the best of times, and particularly difficult if you're not popular. And I wasn't. In fact, some people had gone to the extent of giving me the opprobrious nickname of Dog to express their disapproval. So there I was, walking down the street that sunny day.
Hey! Hey there!
Well, gentlemen, what can I do for you?
We are not gentlemen, Aristogaton. We are officers of the law sent here to apprehend you.
Apprehend me? Officers of the law? I don't understand. What have I done?
Have you not refused to pay several debts? Have you not pretended lameness in order to escape military service? And did you not decline to pay for the burial of your father when he died?
The debts were small and negligible. I dislike military service and reserve my right as a free citizen of Athens to feign any deformity or illness I like. And as for refusing to bury dead fathers, is there a law against that?
Come, we've no time to waste. The Helii awaits. Say what you have to say to the Dicasts and Demosthenes.
I did present my case to the Dicasts, the jury. There were 500 of them present in the open-air court that day. No one wanted to miss that trial, Demosthenes having spread word that he planned to be in top oratorical form. I had spoken in my defense rather well, I thought. But by the time Demosthenes had come to winding up for the prosecution, he had the jury eating out of his hand.
Men of the jury! Men of Athens! That Aristogeiton is called a dog? I don't have to tell you. You know that already. I shall not speak of his being a human monster, though among such monsters he stands first, middle, and last. I shall not speak of these things. As for these things, he cannot probably be held to blame. But I shall speak of his violating the laws of the city. He has told you that he is a free citizen and can do as he pleases. By heaven, suppose every citizen had the boldness and impudence of this Aristogeiton. Suppose all reasoned with themselves as he does, that a man may say or do what he pleases in a democracy without restraint. Suppose each individual, banishing order and discipline from his life, regarded his own will as the law. What would happen then, O men of Athens? Could any government then go on? How say ye? The whole life of men, O Athenians, whether they inhabit a great city or a small one, is governed by law. Laws alone make possible civilized life. They are an invention of the gods, a resolution of wise men, a corrective of errors intentional and unintentional, a compact of society, according to which all who belong to society ought to live. No man may be allowed to put society in peril by disobeying its laws. Your judgment now, O men of Athens.
I'm happy to say that I escaped death.
And jail, citizen?
No, I didn't escape jail. I had much time there to ponder the words of Demosthenes on the role of law in democratic societies.
And your conclusion, citizen?
That laws in democratic societies are not merely means of preserving peace, but also of promoting welfare. Their function enlarges from that of merely reconciling individual human wills into that of satisfying collective human wants. As one of our greatest thinkers, Aristotle, was to put it, laws come into existence originally for the sake of mere life, but they continue in existence for the sake of the good life.
Thank you, Citizen Aristogeiton. Go back to your chair in peace, and thank you.
Thank you.
And there were other men of thought in Greece who pondered upon law also and upon its place in the life of nations. Their thinking gave law new dimensions which have shaped all the centuries since. Notable among these philosophic Greeks was one Socrates, of a stonemason son, of appearance sloven, of mind subtle. His favorite haunts were Athenian temples. His favorite pastime was to corner Athenian youth for involved and often disconcerting philosophic dissertations. Is that not so, Sir Socrates?
Yes. Well, I must confess that many thought so. Indeed, I believe my methods of discussion had much to do with some citizens inviting me to partake of the hemlock.
Didn't you once, sir, begin a discussion on the nature of law and finish up with the law of nature?
Yes. I believe the conversation that day went somewhat like this.
Greetings, O Socrates.
Greetings, O Minos. Tell me, O fair-minded Minos, what is law?
Oh, I know the traps thou art in the habit of setting for the unwary, O Socrates. I shall not be caught. I shall say only that law is law.
That serves my purpose well, Minos. So, let us say that law is what is.
That is just what I said.
I'm glad thou thinkest so. Now, tell me, since law is, what are those things which are, and are, therefore, law?
Oh, that would seem clear. They are the decrees of the state.
Is it necessary to consider law as something beautiful and to seek it as a thing which is good in itself?
How not?
Now, we have said, have we not, that law is a decree of the city?
Oh, we have said so. Mm-hmm.
But are not some decrees good and some evil?
Oh, they are.
But thou hast agreed, hast thou not, that law is good?
I have so. Mm-hmm.
And so it cannot be evil at the same time.
I have an appointment for which I'm getting rather late. If thou wouldst forgive me, I'll run along.
No, stay, my friend. Let us finish this most instructive dialogue. What, then, is law?
I give up.
Why, that is simple, Minos. Law is law.
But that is exactly what I said.
And I agree with thee. Law is law because it is. Now, what is can only be if it is according to nature. Therefore, since the nature of law is to state what is, and since what is can only be if it is according to nature, it must be in the nature of law to follow the law of nature. Is that clear?
Well...
And so, my friend, we have established that the nature of law is to be found only in the law of nature. And this nature is common to all men and all nations. So, law must also be common to all men and all nations. Now I have finished with you. Get the hens, get the hens.
The distinction between law and the laws, between the rules of law, which may vary from nation to nation and be either good or bad, and law itself, which is always good and common to all nations, is perhaps the most important contribution made by Greece to legal thought. In Athens itself, the thought remained, as it had to, in the realm of philosophy. The conditions for giving it a more practical expression had not yet been born, but they soon were, and their birthplace was called Rome. General Pompey, will you please tell us what you did for your native land?
Gladly. Rome, you see, was a city-state. But gradually, inevitably, like the swelling tide of fate, the world became its hinterland. The years produced the need for Roman expansion. The need produced us, the Roman generals, and we, the generals of Rome, produced Roman results. Recall, if you will, just one memorable occasion. It was the last of the B.C. centuries. The year was 62. I had just come back home once again in triumph. I had already brought victories home. First from Europe, and then from Africa. Now I was leading Asia through the Roman streets. My armies and I had swept through 15 countries, 1,000 military strongholds, 900 cities, and 39 towns. I had brought back with me many talents worth of gold and silver, and a dozen shiploads of kings, princes, generals, and royal hostages. The people were wild with joy.
They love me in Rome.
With the world lying at our Roman doorstep, with our domain so wide that Alexander's whole empire fitted in as a mere province, it became both possible and necessary for us Romans to take a world view of society and of law.
Well, that's all I have to say on the subject, but my friend, Senator Cicero here, has something to add, I believe. Cicero?
Senator Cicero. Sir, if you will.
There is but one law by which the society of men is held together, and one lex has established it. For the likeness of all men to each other is far greater than their differences in mind and thought, in virtue, and even in vices.
Most interesting. Please go on, sir.
This law needs no interpreter or expounder but itself. Nor will there be one law in Rome and another in Athens, one in the present and another in time to come. But there shall be one law, eternal and immutable, embracing all peoples and all time. One who looks about him must see that man is in reality a citizen of the world, as of one great city.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, too, General. You may return to your seats. When Rome fell, the vision of world unity under one world law fell also from the horizons of political possibility. The empire, which was a city, disintegrated into a patchwork of feudal factions. The concept of a unifying law of nature lay buried under the debris of shattered centuries. But throughout the sleeping middle years of Europe's life, the need for a legal reawakening built itself with gathering pressure. Scan those now distant years in rapid retrospect. First there came the Crusades, the clash of faith upon faith, of steel upon steel. The Crusades brought Europe's dark ages into contact with the sunlit East. All over the continent, thousands called for the softer and spicier ways of life they had found in the Orient.
Wife, where is the nutmeg? I can't eat this fish without nutmeg. It gives odors that are unfriendly to my nostrils.
The demand for spices and silks led to the search for sea routes to the fragrant lands of the East.
I am Cristoforo Colombo, my queen. I tell thee, the world is round.
The great voyages of geographic discovery interlocked with the great rebirth of the human mind. The Renaissance merged into the Reformation. The Reformation brought the prolonged, bitter wars of the religions, and out of this war rose the Treaty of Westphalia.
Be it known to each and every one who is concerned, or howsoever he may be concerned,
that after the conflicts and the civil commotions which had their origins many years ago had increased to a point where a long and bitter war was started, it finally came to pass by divine goodness that the 11th day of July in the year of Christ 1643 was agreed upon for the beginning of a congress of plenipotentiaries at Munster and Osnabrück in Westphalia.
And the Treaty of Westphalia gave rise to the modern nation-state. All over the crowded landmass of Europe, men found themselves living without the unifying institutions of political allegiance to the Western Emperor and spiritual subordination to the Pope. Nations recognized no superiors now and faced the world with newborn arrogance and pride. And all over the crowded landmass of Europe there arose men to explain and defend that newborn reality, national sovereignty. Ah, Monsieur Baudin, since you have joined us, could we have your views?
Enchanté. I was the first to use the phrase sovereignty. I held that sovereign states, being sovereign, are above the law. They are the law.
And now, Mr. Hobbes, we understand you have put this entire matter of sovereignty in your usually forthright terms, correct?
Yes, my dear fellow, you're dead right. I was the one who wrote the book called Leviathan, borrowed the name from Hebrew poetry, means some kind of a sea monster. That's what sovereign states are, as far as other states are concerned, monsters. In international relations, there's only one law, that of the jungle. You can put it this way: every nation for itself, and may God help the weakest.
With national self-esteem thus philosophically reinforced, nations stood now in aggressive pride all over the continent of Europe, striking attitudes of challenge and of defiance. All about them in those expansive centuries stretched the wide world of spice-laden islands, of empires waiting to be built, and of distant western horizons begging to be explored. Men set sail in all four directions across the 7 seas under a dozen flags. Nations began to stake out liquid claims upon the restless oceans, as they had already done upon the more patient miles of unmoving land.
The Adriatic belongs to the sovereign Republic of Venice.
The Ligurian Sea belonged to us of the sovereign Republic of Genoa.
To the Catholic Kingdom of Portugal belongs the whole of the Indian Ocean and the whole of the Atlantic south of Morocco.
The Pacific, together with the Gulf of Mexico, is the exclusive domain of Spain.
Thus came the historic collision, the collision of sovereignties at sea from which history was destined to fashion an important lesson. The beginnings can be traced to a certain day when a certain ship under a certain English captain sailed into a certain English harbor.
Ahoy there! Ahoy!
Hurrah for the Golden Hind! She's returned!
Home again. England once again. Round the world and back to England after 3 years, my men. How fares the English Queen, my countrymen? Is she alive and well?
The Queen! To the Queen! God bless the Queen!
Like a visitation from on high did I and my men descend upon the coast of Chile, that land which lies beside the Pacific waves. We have shown the Spaniards that no frontiers may be erected before an English bark. England sails where England pleases.
The Spaniards took a somewhat different view from that of Francis Drake about that famous voyage. His Excellency Ambassador Bernardino de Mendoza, envoy extraordinary of His Catholic Majesty Philip II, King of Spain, acting upon royal instructions, sought an audience with the Virgin Queen in order to lodge a formal protest.
Proceed, Ambassador. You have my permission to speak. I said you have my permission to speak, not to cough.
May it please your Majesty?
I am not pleased.
But, Madame, you have not even heard me yet.
But I've seen you, and that is enough. And what I see does not commend itself to me.
Your Majesty is plain spoken.
I speak plainly most of the time. I lie only for amusement, not for deception. I am English.
I can only see through Spanish eyes, Madame, and therefore...
Spanish eyes, stiff. Why Spanish eyes? What, pray, is wrong with English eyes? In any case, stop beating around the bush and come to the point. What is on your mind?
As I was saying, Madam...
You were saying nothing. You were only coughing and blabbering something about Spanish eyes. To the point, Ambassador. To the point.
Well, then, Madame, it's about a sea captain of yours. One Francis Drake.
One Francis Drake, did I hear you say? One Francis Drake. The Francis Drake, if you please. In fact, Sir Francis Drake. I shall dub him a Knight of the Realm. What about Drake?
He's a pirate.
Rubbish, he's English.
That's besides the point.
Oh, so you have a point. Well, what is the point, then?
The point is, Your Majesty, that Drake had no right whatsoever to sail his English bark through the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is, by virtue of the bull promulgated by His Holiness Pope Alexander, the sole and exclusive property of my royal master, His Most Catholic Majesty, Philip II, King of Spain. No ship of any foreign flag may ply the waters of my royal master's Pacific domain without his royal consent.
Have you said what you had to say?
Yes, Madame. And Your Majesty will find that your Prime Minister, William Cecil, recognizes that Spanish sovereignty over the Pacific has been wantonly violated.
You make numerous errors, Ambassador. Take them one by one. Primus, William Cecil is and has been for the past 9 years Lord Burleigh. Kindly refer to him as such. Secundus, Lord Burleigh, whom you have called William Cecil, is not my Prime Minister. I am my own minister on all matters of state and seek counsel from no one. And Tertius, no Spanish sovereignty has been violated in the Pacific Ocean because the Pacific does not and cannot belong to Spain alone. The Pacific Ocean, like all oceans, is and must remain open to the vessels of all nations. My good man, the use of the sea is common to all. No title to any ocean can belong to any one nation, since neither nature nor regard for public use permits any exclusive possession. Putting it briefly and in Latin, Ambassador, mare est liberum. Go tell that to your royal master.
Mare Liberum, the Free Seas. 29 years after Queen Elizabeth's interview with the Spanish ambassador, a book appeared which was destined to become the foundation of the modern law of nations. The author of the book was a Dutch lawyer by the name of Hugo Croesus. Mynheer Croesus, will you step forward, please?
Gladly.
What was the view you expressed in your book?
As a matter of fact, I wrote 2 books. The first one was known as Mare Liberum, or if you prefer the full title, it was called Mare Liberum soi de jure quod Batavis competit et indicana commercia dissertatio.
You don't say.
In this book, I endorse the Elizabethan view that since the sea is free by the law of nature, being incapable of physical possession, it must also be free by the laws of man. But it is my second book that I regard as being more important. The title of this one was...
The shorter one this time, I beg you.
De Jure Belli ac Pacis, concerning the law of war and peace.
The substance, sir.
I now dealt with the question of sovereignty not only upon the sea, but with the principle of sovereignty as a whole. I show that sovereignty does not place nations beyond the law. Indeed, it makes laws even more necessary. Since the sovereign nations share a common world, they must have a common law among themselves, a law binding each in the interest of all.
Thank you, mein Herr Croesus.
Tot uw dienst, meneer.
So were the seeds of social wisdom planted by you and others who thought like you in that distant 17th century. They were then planted for the family of nations, as 200,000 years earlier they had been planted by Paleolithic Pa for the family of man. But though the seeds were planted, it took centuries to compel their growth. The compulsion came as a matter of life and death, a matter of both ever-expanding opportunities for a richer life and for a more massive collective death. Take the matters of life first. 1769, the Industrial Revolution.
Industrial competition is ruinous to all. We must regulate wages and conditions of labor by international treaty.
1804.
Das ist ja ganz unmöglich. This is impossible. This is chaos. There are trains all over Europe, but still you cannot travel from one country into another because each has different rules and different fares. We must reach international understanding on inter-European railway traffic.
1844.
Telegraph messages are held up at every border for days, each nation demanding payment for onward transmission at its own independent sovereign rates of payment. This is ridiculous. We must set up some rules for all to obey.
And so it went, each new expanding opportunity for a richer life, creating the need for wider laws of common obedience. They came even though it took time for them to break through the stubborn ramparts of national sovereignty. At first they were inclined to say,
Nein.
No.
No.
But soon these words changed a little. Soon they said,
Vielleicht.
Peut-être.
Perhaps.
But they finally had to start saying,
Ja. Oui.
Yes.
So treaties multiplied, treaties creating new laws to regulate the expanding ways of international life. And then there were also the expanding ways of death, creating their own needs. Between 1803 and 1815, the wars of Napoleon, fought with guns, rifles, and horses. After that, they had to meet. Prince von Metternich, as one of the illustrious participants in the Congress of Vienna, could you tell us what you did in 1815?
Oh, we had ourselves a ball, as I believe they say in America these days. There has never been anything like it. All those count heads, diplomats, and the aristocracy and...
Sorry to interrupt, Prince, but we are more interested at the moment in the political and legal rather than the social aspects of the Congress. What did you do politically?
We redrew the map of Europe, liquidating the problems Napoleon had created.
Did you try to set up any universal rule of law for nations to obey?
No. The need for it wasn't there in my time. The moment wasn't ready.
Thank you, Prince. And then there came another war, 1914 to 1918. fought with bigger guns, better rifles, and also with inventions called U-boats and aeroplanes. The need was getting bigger also and easier to recognize.
The high contracting parties, in order to promote international cooperation and to achieve international peace and security, by the firm establishment of the understanding of international law as the actual rule of conduct among governments, agree to this Covenant of the League of Nations.
And then there came yet another war. They called it the Second. Fought with still bigger guns, still better rifles, still better versions of the U-boats, and a still larger alphabet of death, V for V-bombs, and A for the bomb which was atomic. The need now could be heard as never before. It was there now, beyond reasonable doubt. And so they spoke at last. Not kings and emperors, not high contracting parties, but we, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind, and to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and respect for the obligations arising from treaties and other sources of international law can be maintained, have resolved to combine our efforts to accomplish these aims. Our story ends, the story of mankind's title deeds to a common humanity under a common law. The lawful story, which began as a narrow trail in some now-forgotten forest clearing some 200,000 years ago, widening with each pressure of history's needs to its present dimensions of chartered universality, to the law of the United Nations. Contained in one preamble, 111 articles, and one special annex, this universal law can be reduced to just one big don't.
No nation may, henceforth, claim the sovereign right of war. No nation may use force or the threat of force as a means of settling international disputes.
And this universal law can also be reduced to just one big do.
All nations shall seek to harmonize their conflicting political interests through every available means of peace, and shall cooperate, each with the other, in ensuring social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom for all.
Is this law always obeyed? Perhaps not. But if laws were always obeyed, they would become unnecessary, as Plato taught in the distant dead decades.
Laws are made for an imperfect, not a perfect world.
Or as Secretary General Hammarskjöld has said for decades that now live.
It is easy to say that it is pointless to state a law if it cannot be enforced. However, to do so is to forget that if the law is the inescapable law of the future, it would be treason to the future not to state the law simply because of the difficulties of the present.
The inescapable law of the future. That is our exit for the present. The present where the past lives forever, and where the future dies each newborn moment to be buried in the ever-living past. We have journeyed to this concluding moment through the inescapable crossroads of history's 200,000 lawful years. We shall all surely meet again, the past, the present, and the future, at some other inescapable crossroads, another 200,000 years hence. And if we do, of this you may be sure, it will be through law, and law alone. That, ladies and gentlemen, is beyond reasonable doubt.
You have been listening to Beyond Reasonable Doubt, a special presentation on the origin and growth of law reaching out through the centuries to the United Nations Charter. The narrator was Quentin Reynolds. Music was composed and conducted by Charles Paul. The program was brought to you in commemoration of United Nations Day. It was written by Gol O'Bry, with special effects by Hal Johnson. Beyond Reasonable Doubt was produced by the international staff of United Nations Radio.
In ancient days, when to travel too far meant a nasty fall from the edge of a flat and finite earth, and when everyone was convinced that life in the unknown lands was, at best, barbaric, the mapmakers could hardly be blamed for making their familiar marginal note.
Here be dragons.
Today, of course, though our maps may not be geophysically perfect, they serve our needs pretty well. And there's no such place as an unknown land anymore. Yet, in a sense, the dragons are still with us. Not in our land, naturally. But somewhere, vaguely, over there.
United Nations Radio presents Down with Dragons, a program about international understanding and, in particular, a 10-year UNESCO project designed to foster mutual appreciation of the cultures of East and West.
An apartment block in a big city, a hot night after a hot day at the end of a hot week. In one apartment, much gaiety. In another, much and mounting irritation as two tired people toss and turn.
Are you asleep?
What do you think?
Oh, I wish it'd cool off.
And I wish them apes across the courtyard would shut up. That's it. That does it.
In two strides is at the open window.
Hey, you! Yeah? What do you want? Are you gonna shut that thing off? Or do I have to come over there in person and smash it with my own two hands? Huh?
Them animals. And nothing but animals.
Which just goes to show, close togetherness is no guarantee of good relations. Now, widen the view somewhat. Remember when radio was still a novelty? We watched it grow and we said,
marvelous thing, you know. Nation speaking to nation just like that. Should do wonders for peace.
But now we know it ain't necessarily so. True, nations do speak to nations 24 hours a day. At this very moment, we are moving slowly across the shortwave bands. But what are they saying? And how much do their audiences care, anyway? Telecommunications and jet planes have indeed made this a very small planet. The platitudes on that point swarm round us like locusts. But it's no guarantee of good relations either. So, what's the trouble? Let's look back. In the 16th century, an Italian missionary, Matteo Ricci, followed the footsteps of Marco Polo and ended up having tea with the Emperor of China in the imperial capital, Peking. As a conversation piece, he produced from his satchel a brand new map of the world.
As you can see, sir, it is the very latest map. It shows the newly discovered continent of America.
Most interesting.
In here, right in the center, is the city of Rome.
Show me, please. Where is Peking? I do not see it.
Here, sir, over on the right-hand edge of the map.
Your map is wrong. Rome is not the center. I rule the Middle Kingdom, and in the middle of the Middle Kingdom is Peking, and in the middle of Peking is the Temple of Heaven, and the Temple of Heaven is the exact center of the whole world.
Oh, no, sir, I assure you, everyone agrees that Rome
Please, you may go now.
Onward to the 18th century, and another meeting between East and West. In 1793, a British envoy returned to the court of King George III after a visit to the Emperor Qianlong.
May it please your Majesty, a missive from the Emperor. Read it, please. You, O King, impelled by your humble desire to partake of the benefits of our civilization, have dispatched a mission respectfully bearing your memorial.
Don't think I care for his attitude very much. Go on.
I have perused your memorial. The earnest terms in which it is couched reveal a respectful humility on your part, which is highly praiseworthy.
Egad!
If I have commanded that the tribute offerings sent by you, O King, are to be accepted, this was solely in consideration for the spirit which prompted you to dispatch them from afar. Our dynasty's majestic virtue has penetrated into every country under heaven, and kings of all nations have offered their costly tribute by land and sea. As your ambassador can see for himself, we possess all things. I set no value on objects strange or ingenious, and have no use for your country's manufactures.
Enough! We will not listen to such insolence.
Is this, perhaps, the trouble? We don't want to be dogmatic about it, but maybe it is, or at least an important element in it. Egocentricity at the individual level and ethnocentricity at the national. These are qualities, of course, which are not confined to emperors, monarchs, or missionaries, or any particular people. Nor are they exclusively characteristic of the past. We dredged the past for our two examples because, to quote contemporary parallels, might be a little invidious. And anyway, as the past is part of the present, we can't escape it if we want to see the relations between nations today in their true perspective. So let's take another, and more serious, look at history.
Madam President and friends, I wonder if this loudspeaker carries my voice to the farthest end of this vast audience. Will some of those who are far away will raise their hands if they listen to what I'm saying? Do you listen? All right.
This is the voice of a great man, slender of build, grey hair so thin it was little more than a fuzz on his dark-skinned head, a stubbly moustache, steel-rimmed glasses over eyes that could express everything but contempt and hate.
I was wondering what I was to speak to you. I wanted to collect my thoughts. I tried to scribble a few words. You will be sorry to hear from me that piece of paper is not by my side. But that is nothing.
This is the voice of Mahatma Gandhi. The recording was made in March 1947, when India's passage to independence was all but formally complete. The vast audience he spoke to had assembled in Delhi from many parts of Asia. The essence of what he said to them is in this one paragraph near the end of his speech.
If you want to give a message again to the West, it must be a message of love. It must be a message of truth. There must be a conquest. Please, that will interfere with my speech and that will interfere with your understanding also. I want to capture your hearts and don't want to receive your claps. Let your hearts clap in unison with what I am saying, and I think I shall have finished my work.
A message again to the West. In the perspective of history, the key word there is again, a repetition. And the original? In a Buddhist temple, the drum call to prayer. And the chant of priests.
The one who is clean, who is without vices, who finds out the truth by himself. I take this one as my refuge.
The good teaching of the one who has found out the truth by himself. I take this teaching as my refuge.
The good disciples of the one who has found out truth by himself. I take these disciples as my refuge.
From the East, the spiritual heritage of almost all mankind. The messages of love and truth by the Buddha, Confucius, Jesus, Krishna, Lao Tse, Mahavira, Muhammad, Moses, Zarathustra. Messages variously given, variously interpreted, variously enshrined. Yet however the formal arrangements of stone and glass and tile and gold may differ from the Shri Dagon and the Angkor Fort to Al-Masjid Al-Haram and Al-Azhar to Salisbury and St. Peter's, the essential sense of unity, the ultimate aspiration of all, remains. This Eastern heritage, now the heritage of all, cannot be denied. But in the perspective of history and within the context of East-West understanding today, it has, perhaps because of the universal tendency to oversimplify difficult relationships, contributed to some rather misleading ideas. The obvious one, of course, is the not uncommon Western view that the East is peopled entirely by nail-bedded mystics, and therefore incomprehensible and unchangeable.
The end of the fight is a tombstone white, with the name of the late deceased, and the epitaph drear, "A fool lies here who tried to hustle the East."
A little couplet by the poet Kipling, written no doubt with all the conviction typical of the 19th century in the West. But let it be admitted, conversely, that there's a not uncommon Eastern view that the West is entirely empirical in its outlook, and therefore probably unprincipled and incurably addicted to material comfort. Now, the only trouble about these ideas and distinctions is that if they mean anything at all, they've only arisen in fairly recent times, in, say, the last 300 or 400 years. They ignore the East's early and quite unmystical achievements in science, architecture, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. They ignore, too, the fact that, far from it being impossible for the twain to meet, East and West have been in touch with each other culturally and commercially, on a more or less continuous basis for thousands of years. Marco Polo was only one of the many Western businessmen who went east on trade missions to buy silks and spices and jewels and perfumes. True, in the early stages, the West didn't have much to offer in return, except in the cultural field. Greek or Buddhist art is a conspicuous example. Many of the first representations of the Buddha in stone are unmistakably Greek in character. The distinctively Oriental sculptures were evolved later. So when and how did the distinctions recognized by our immediate forefathers so firmly begin to take shape? We've already noted the probable contribution of the spiritual tradition. There were other and possibly more direct influences as well. On the banks of the Rhine in the 1450s, Johann Gutenberg rediscovered the Eastern art of printing, the green light for the onrush of adventure and achievement called the Renaissance. At the end of the century, Columbus, searching for a quick route to Cathay, found the American continent. Vasco da Gama, rounding the Cape of Good Hope, bypassed the Middle East as a trade route to India. The age of discovery was underway, and the rush for riches spurred on by the bitter rivalry between the Dutch, English, French, Portuguese, and Spanish East India companies.
You will see that Holland has an entire monopoly of trade with the East Indies. No other nation will be permitted any share whatever.
The instructions from the Dutch Company's Board of Control to its first Governor-General, Pieter Boot, in 1608. Similarly, in London, with the English Company's instructions to its first governor, Sir Thomas Smythe, in 1600.
By royal charter, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth has conferred upon us the sole right of trading with the East Indies. Unauthorized interlopers are liable to forfeiture of ships and cargo.
Nobody really expected peaceful cooperation, and there wasn't any. Except during one solemnly comic hour in 1619, London and Amsterdam concluded what they called a treaty of defence to prevent disputes between the two companies. Its terms were transmitted to the respective fleets in Far Eastern waters, and a stately and courteous little ceremony was staged.
Dress out all flags! Man the yards!
The two fleets passed in review, each in line ahead. The order was for cheers and a salute of cannon.
Ship's company will give 3 cheers! Hip! Hip! Hip!
Shiver me timbers. Treachery.
The story goes that it took just an hour to organize this goodwill gesture. But before the cannon smoke of the salute had cleared away, the game was on again. The violent scramble was resumed for forts, factories, and fat profits, which everyone in the business, by the way, certainly earned. When the Dutch company, for example, was at its height in the mid-17th century, the Board of Control in Amsterdam would get facts like these in its annual report.
Gentlemen, the company now commands 150 trading ships, 40 warships, and 10,000 soldiers. Thanks to their vigilance, the insolent sallies of the French and the English have been countered, and I am happy to declare, for this year, a dividend of 40%.
The tide, which for centuries had flowed gently but continuously from east to west, was turning turbulently in the opposite direction. The companies, with arms and quite astonishing independence, carried on until even the home governments eventually decided that things had gone far enough. The trading posts and the spheres of private interest became the formal colonies of the 19th century. And East-West relations in all these years? Any mutual understanding, as people in touch with people?
My dearest mother.
One can imagine it. A promising young executive, writing home from a distant post.
You ask about the natives. I fear, Mother dear, there is little I can tell you. We have, you see, been very busy. Yet I'll hazard this opinion. You would find their mode of dress, when it is not plainly immodest, inelegant. Their food we do not eat, but I am told it is curious in the extreme, with dire effects upon the cultivated taste and digestion. Perhaps, my dear mother, you will speak for me to father, and urge that the time has come for my promotion, and return to the head office at home. Of course, you know this is something...
Young Daniel in a den of dragons. His was a widespread attitude throughout the pre-colonial and colonial ages. The natives were exasperatingly different. The merchants, missionaries, soldiers, and civil servants who were obliged to meet them were busy men, impatient to buy, to sell, to contract, and to convert. But to understand, that takes patience, and only a few dedicated professional Orientalists had enough of it. So the dragons thrived, and as the growth of steam-powered industry gave added strength to the colonial powers, and as the colonial people seemed to slip further and further behind the march of progress, they appeared, in many eyes, as odder and odder and odder creatures. Until... until our own times, until now, the present.
Our memories may be a millstone round our necks. It's good now and then to deposit them in the cloakroom of modern times and let them stay there.
These are 20th century words, written only a few months ago by a Lebanese statesman, the permanent delegate of his country to UNESCO, Charles Amoun. Continue the quote.
People must forget that they once occupied a country and had to govern it by main force, that they exploited it economically, humiliated it by all sorts of legal or devious discriminatory practices, disparaged its culture and language, and cast scorn on its institutions and faith. With this over and done with, the only possible reconquest is a cultural one.
Words directed to the West, and words, too, for the East.
We are asking the Occident to forget, but we shall ask the Orient to remember. We shall ask it to remember all the benefits conferred by hygiene, science, and education, the roads, ports, and hospitals that have been built, and the modern techniques which have been thrown open to it, and on which its salvation depends.
40 or 50 years ago, it would have been well nigh impossible, intellectually, for anyone in the East or the West to think in such terms, to make such suggestions. When our century was young, the geopolitical and economic relations in a Western-dominated world didn't encourage flexible attitudes or minds responsive to change. But now our century is middle-aged. We've cracked the old foundations with 2 world wars and an assortment of smaller ones. We've taken the elemental, invisible source of all power and fashioned from it the ultimate dragon, the only dragon we now need to fear. What was is no longer. What may be can already be glimpsed in the new political, economic, and cultural contours of our time. The exultant cry of millions throughout Asia and Africa, greeting freedom as a reality or a prospect. The clamorous din of industry in lands awakened from the rural sleep of centuries, the tractor replacing the ox, the steelworks beside the mud brick cottage.
Cuba, yes. Czechoslovakia, yes. Denmark, yes. Dominican Republic.
The nations assembled within the terms of a charter which reaffirms the equal rights of men and women, of nations large and small.
Depending on temperament and background, reactions to this evolution may vary.
This is a quotation, in translation from the Swedish, from a speech which Mr. Dag Hammarskjöld, the Secretary-General of the United Nations, gave not long ago to the Academic Association of the University of Lund.
One may reach back for the imagined calm of the closed world. One may find one's spiritual home in the very disintegration of the European world of the fading 19th century, or one may reach ahead towards the glimpse of a new synthesis, inspired by the dream of a new culture, in which there is achieved, on a level encompassing the whole world, what once seemed to have become a regional reality in Europe.
Now, anyone taking the pulse beats or watching the temperature chart of international relations today may well conclude that a new synthesis is a pretty remote possibility, that the dream is pretty forlorn. But is it? The whole concept of the United Nations is based on a philosophy of solidarity. If there's no solidarity, it's not the fault of the concept or the philosophy, and anyway, the present process of evolution has carried us a long way beyond the basic idea. In the economic and political spheres, the institutions and the machinery exist to promote genuine understanding through continuous and close contact. And in the cultural sphere? It has been said that the days of cultural tribalism are over, that we no longer have cultural enclosures, each neatly separated. Yet between this, for instance, and this. Between these two, there is a difference that can't be measured simply in miles. To an unresponsive Western ear, the tonalities of Eastern music may well sound like the voice of a dragon, not to mention the possible effects of Wagnerian thunder on Eastern ears. And further, if you don't restrict yourself to music, painting, poetry, drama, all the incidental expressions of a culture, but define it in these terms.
Culture means the total accumulation of material objects, ideas, symbols, beliefs, sentiments, values, and social forms which are passed on from one generation to another in any given society.
If you take that as a reasonable basis, the differences between East and West can loom very large, but not so large that they're insurmountable.
3 years ago, the General Conference of UNESCO, meeting in New Delhi, unanimously launched a major project to extend over 10 years. Its objective, to promote the mutual appreciation of Eastern and Western cultural values. The key word, perhaps, is appreciation, which, joined to values as expressions of the human spirit and man's more or less conscious ideals, can help to create a worldwide sense of moral solidarity and a recognition of cultural interdependence, as clear as the recognition we already have of economic interdependence. In ways too numerous to mention here, organizations in almost every one of UNESCO's member states are actively translating the ideas behind the project into positive programs in schools, universities, adult education groups, through the media of information. If, after 10 years, the movement has gained enough momentum to continue by itself, if East and West have become both more keenly aware of the links which bind them, if they see proof every day of mutual respect, then the Delhi decision of 1956 will not have been made in vain.
Earlier in this program, we heard the voice of Mahatma Gandhi. We hear him again now, not in his own voice, but through some words he once wrote but never recorded on tape or disc. He said,
"I do not want my house to be walled in on all sides and my windows to be stuffed. I want the culture of all lands to be blown about my house as freely as possible. But I refuse to be blown off my feet by any."
This, in the middle age of our century, would seem to be as solid a foundation stone as any upon which to build a new world edifice, a new understanding, a new synthesis, devoid of all dragons.
Down with Dragons was written and produced by the international staff of United Nations Radio. Detailed information about the major project on the mutual appreciation of Eastern and Western cultural values can be obtained from the headquarters of UNESCO, Place de Fontenoy, Paris 7, France.
United Nations Radio presents Tomorrow for Two, an actuality drama about two young people who have lived in two different worlds, a young man and a young woman. This is their story, as written by Alan Sloan and narrated by Herbert Marshall. Tomorrow for Two.
It was 15 below zero that night as I walked up Boulevard West in Montreal looking for an address. Damn cold. The windows of the grocery on the corner, proprietors Dupré and McNair, were furned with steam turned ice. A fine night to be out on a routine job, said I, looking for the house number. 3796, 3798. There. 3800 Boulevard West. Warmer inside the front door of the apartment house. But rows of buttons to push to get upstairs and names. Gentilhomme, Carr. There it was. Chabot, Tommy. Chabot, 3A. I'd found them. I rang the buzzer. They were home. I started up the stairs. They'd be surprised to see me. They were expecting somebody on this routine check, but not in a million years me. For all they knew, I was still in Austria. Second flight. You see, they were displaced persons who'd come to Canada. They'd been here 2 years now, and the International Refugee Organization was doing a routine check on how they were making out. I used to be an IRO official in the camp they lived in. Now my visit was unofficial. Third flight. Somebody playing Chopin on their floor. 3D-C-B 3A. This is the place. Chabot.
Chabot here?
I'm from the IRO.
Oh, yes. Well... Oh, Mr. Bill!
What is it, Tommy?
Mr. Bill! Erica, come! Look! Him!
Who, what? Oh, come in, then stand in the hall. Come... Mr. Bill!
You see, as an IRO officer in Aston, DP Center 100 in Linz, Austria, I've been Mr. Bill to all the people of all nationalities, lumped under the short title DP. And these kids, Tommy and Erica, were my friends. And now I was in their new home. From DP Center 100, Barrack 17, Room 12, window corner, to apartment 3A.
Coffee, Erica. Make coffee.
Beer, bring beer.
And cakes. Where are the little cakes?
Mr. Bill, why didn't you
Take
tell
his
you were
coat,
coming?
take his hat.
Show him the
Sure,
hat. Show him the
I will, yes.
Now, that's better. Calm down, you two. Calm down.
Mr. Bill.
What is it, Erica?
Calm down. Oh, no. Not every day comes somebody from another world. Go. Sit the men together inside. I make coffee.
Tommy dragged me into the parlor, but I wasn't seeing it. I was watching his face, dark, eager, younger now than he had looked then, but the eyes still burning. And I thought of the first time I'd seen him and Erica, when they turned up in my camp, DPs looking for a home. I signed them in, filled in their card. Okay. Sabo, Tommy, 21. Sabo, Erica, 19. Hungarian. Married. Displaced person. Eligibility checked. All right, well, oh, Sabo.
Yes, sir.
Parents?
Dead. They were taken...
Yeah, all right. Your wife's?
She can't speak English. Hers too. Dead.
Yeah, yes, Sabo, it's late. I want to get you into a barracks.
Barracks?
Yes. You didn't expect paradise, did you? This was an old slave labor camp, you know.
Yeah, I know, but
Now, big youngster, let me tell you something here and now. Everybody in this camp has stories. Begin here to forget them. Where stay?
Yeah.
All right. I'll put you in, let's see, 17, room 12.
A room?
With another family, Sabo. But I'll give you the corner with the window. Now, come on, let's get you settled, and I'll get something to eat.
Thank you.
I suppose this is all the luggage you have, this bag?
Yeah.
Come on.
No,
I'll carry it. As I stood with Tommy and Erica in the middle of their new life in Montreal, the world they had come from, that the three of us remembered, seemed so far away. In a flash, I was back in Aston the first time I'd arrived. The end of my first day. Another DP, my right-hand man, my interpreter, my friend, his name was Dusan Teodorovich, called Teddy, put his hand on my shoulder that night.
Mr. Bill, I tell you one thing, make it not so hard for you. Don't listen to the stories. Be hard.
No, how can you be hard?
Believe me, don't listen. The first has a story, the 500th has a story, the 5,000th has a story. So much misery. You going to carry it all in your heart? Be hard.
And then all of a sudden, as if he'd been reading my thoughts, Tommy piped up.
Teddy. Where is Teddy? Where did he go? Australia? United States? Brazil? Chile?
Teddy, I left him back in Aston 2 months ago.
Oh. Tell me truth.
The truth is he'll never get away. His lung is even worse.
Teddy.
And Tommy, it's not only Teddy. There are 7,000 more the IRO is taking care of. The sick ones have very little chance of finding a new home like you have.
I see. And Margaret Beck? And the skipper? And Barkev who sang?
Later, Tommy, later. I'll tell you about all of them.
But now we have coffee and little cakes. Whipped cream.
What's so funny?
In this house. You like our house? Look, 3 rooms, Mr. Bill. Look.
Oh, all right, Erica. All right, I see. Well, what's the joke?
The joke is in this house, whipped cream.
And bath.
Because when we first got here, for the first 2 weeks, we are eating nothing but whipped cream.
And taking baths.
Whipped cream on everything.
So extravagant, but we couldn't help ourselves.
You understand, we could not help
And
it.
baths all the day, all the night. Never could we get enough baths.
Oh, whipped cream. Oh, wait, Tommy, don't put sugar on Mr. Bill's coffee. He takes it black.
Oh.
I remember.
I remember something else. I remember a little girl who couldn't speak a word of English.
Oh, I am still tied the tongue.
Oh.
Tongue-tied.
Oh, you.
Then we just sat there. So much to say, so much to ask. And no words with which to start. Just 3 hearts together and very full. And nothing to say. Well,
Yes.
So now,
tell me what...
No, you tell me. After all, that's why I'm here.
Why?
I want to see if you're adjusted. That's why I came, to see if you're doing well. How you've adapted to your new world. But most of all, Tommy, Erica, just to see if you're happy.
Are we happy? Happy. Happy, Mr. Bill. This is a generalization. Big. A great big thing. A generalization. I do not like generalizations. I do not like to speak them. Because we are victims of a generalization.
I see.
Mr. Bill, I tell you what. First, we tell you all we can remember what happened to us after we see you for the last time. All right?
Sure, fine. I was going to ask.
I remember, Mr. Bill, the last night in camp.
Yes, I came to see you. I was afraid I'd miss you at the train the next morning.
Yes. And when you left, I didn't want to say goodbye. Not to anyone. Because I knew how it had been every time we had said goodbye to the others who got out before us. Was I happy for them? No. I envied them. For a moment, I almost hated them. I hated them for having what I did not have. I know what they must have seen in my eyes. I didn't want to see it in our friend's eyes.
Mr. Bill, I remember then, the next morning at dawn, at the train, we did see them. There were tears. You remember, Mr. Bill?
I remember.
Yes, many tears. And the look in their eyes, Tommy, I saw it. And you know when it was worst, the look?
No.
It was when Teddy came to the side of the train. Remember, Mr. Bill, how we leaned out of those train cars and yelled to each other? Well, he came, and he was going to say something, and then he saw, written in the chalk on the train, the words, Nach Canada, Nach Freiheit.
To Canada, to freedom.
Did you see those words, Tommy?
Yes. I put them there.
You did? Oh, I never knew that. I never knew that all the time we were on the train.
You remember it was March, almost 2 years ago today, from Istanbul, way deep inside Austria, to the German border. Days and nights on the train, Mr. Bill, all across Germany to the North Sea, to Bremerhaven, the port.
3 weeks we waited there.
Then, all of a sudden, we are on the dock.
331, 332.
Everybody in a long line. That was a good line. Calling out the numbers, everybody with a little card. Going the gangplank into the ship, bundles, packages, old men, babies, waiting. Oh, I tell you, Mr. Bill, it was so wonderful. I am all over, I say, with all the things I have been, only looking what's going to happen, what's waiting for me in the new place, what's going to be there. Ah, that day I never forget.
Wait, I'll show you something. Don't go away.
What?
Tommy and I looked at each other as Erica disappeared into the next room.
You know, just to have a place where you can go from a room to a room and still be home. I tell you...
Here. You see? I saved this.
The card, the number card.
The boarding number. Our numbers, 282, 283. Even the little safety pin.
She's a big saver, that one. All kinds of junk.
Oh, I look at it very often, Tommy. Often I touch my little pin. See?
I never knew you have this thing.
Well, why not? Later on, many, many years later, don't you think it's going to be nice to show that number?
To who?
My children.
It's not good to be a number.
It's not bad to be a number like this, Tommy.
Just the same, I tell you. Here I carry nothing. No numbers, certificates, no who am I, no where do I come from, where am I going.
Here, nobody asks me such. Why, the first day I got off the boat...
Wait too fast. Let me tell. Mr. Bill, all across the ocean, it is very rough. I am seasick. But when we get to Halifax, Suddenly I am better. Oh, and what great feeling that day.
Kindly step this way, please. Don't separate.
Oh, I tell you, that is the best of all to remember. When they put on your papers that stamp. Bing. Okay.
No, it's...
Yes, a red stamp.
Legally admitted.
That's right, a round one.
A big one.
A big book they wrote you in. And you are in Canada.
Then one thing after another. Oh, how many things. Up to me comes an old lady.
Do you need clothes, stockings, a skirt? Please, take something, anything.
But all the time in Europe we're getting things like this. No more. I say thank you. No.
To all new Canadians, do not leave the pier. Do not leave the pier. This is for your own protection. Do not leave the pier.
But you know how I am. How anybody is in a new land. I'm curious. So I go out. I go outside in Halifax. And I walk around for hours, free. Nobody asks me who, what, where. Nobody asks me anything. It's a wonderful feeling.
And me? What about me? I was the one who saw that taxi car first. It was, so busy. Cars everywhere.
Taxi, folks? Taxi?
No, we don't know.
Eh? Where are you from?
Austria.
Oh, just off the boat, eh?
Oh, yes, just...
Well, get in.
How can we to get in?
How can you? Get in, I say. Get in and see the town.
Oh, but we have no money.
That don't matter. Get in and I'll show you Halifax. And buy you a Sunday.
Sunday? But this is Tuesday. And he took us all over Halifax. Ice cream, he bought us everything. All over and back to the dock and not a cent to pay. And said,
Folks, I'm proud to be the man to show you Canada first. Be happy here.
One more thing, Mr. Bill. Came time for the trains again. And one more farewell. Goodbye, dear friends. Another departing of old friends. Another goodbye. The last goodbye. We separated. Some of us went to Vancouver, some to Toronto. You see, each of us had some place to go. People had sent for us, promised to take us. Old friends all around us saying goodbye, Mr. Bill.
I understand. Well, what then, Tommy?
Then, after that, it was straight going. Oh, no. One more camp. Terrible.
How can you say that? It was beautiful.
We came to Montreal, and one night we had to stay in a reception center. But a camp.
An old Air Force camp. Beautiful, the beds.
But a camp.
But the bed, so soft. The blanket blue with shiny. I could just hold it and look at it. Too soft. We did not sleep. And showers clean. Oh, how can you complain?
A camp. But I don't want to think about camps anymore.
You are right. You should think now of the happy things.
The happy things. What are the happy things, Erica?
Well, let me see. Oh, excuse me, the door. Yes?
Good day, madam. I am selling tickets for the Postman Dance. You would like to buy one? Yes, only.
Oh, yes, just a minute. Tommy?
Yes, Erica?
Tommy, give me $50.
What for?
Postman at the door. There's going to be a dance. I'll buy a ticket.
Sure. Here, buy 2.
Okay.
Mr. Bill, you remember your story you told us in Austria? American says to Nazi, my country is better. Nazi says, why? We are stronger. American says...
Yes, but when we hear footsteps on the stairs in the middle of the night, we know it's the milkman.
Yes. So, the postman. That is a happy thing. Not to be afraid. Little things, Mr. Bill. Look, our rooms.
A piano.
Wait, I'll show you something else. Look.
The telephone book?
Yes. Here, printed our name, Jabot, printed in the phone book. We are a somebody again.
But the bad things. Tommy, Erica, what about them?
The stories? I tell you something. On my job, I am saleswoman in Carson's. At first, the old ladies, the nice old ladies, they hear my accent. They ask, "Where are you from?" "Austria." "Oh, tell us your story." Everybody wants to hear the story, so I tell them. Then my boss comes and says, "Erica, please, you sell a blouse for under $10, no story. With a blouse for $10, tell the story."
So, we are not here to tell terrible stories. Mr. Bill, everybody has his own misery, his own terrible truth. We must not tell more misery, just to be ourselves and live.
Yes. But living here, may I ask again, are you happy?
Are we happy?
Yes.
Well, I try to tell. Used to be to have bread and life was enough. Never mind thinking happy, not happy. Just to live, to stay alive. And I tell you something, even the worst was not too bad.
Yes, but we say that now with a stomach full.
Erica, please. Now, Mr. Bill, a little thing makes you feel good. To walk in the street, meet someone. Hello, hello, how are you? Fine? Well, so long. Sure, goodbye. Somebody knows you. And then little things make you feel bad. In the morning, the trolley is late. I could punch it in the nose. It is cold. Do I say, "Fool, fool, be happy you are here. The trolley is late. Remember how bad it used to be"? Do I say?
No, we never say.
Is it better than it used to be, Tommy, or isn't it?
Of course. Are we happy? Of course. I had the feeling just tonight when you are here. I wonder for a minute, where are we? This is us? Erica and Tommy? Here?
Yes, true.
Sure. It strikes me all of a sudden. This house, this room. Look, us. A piano. The name on the door, the name on the street. How strange. How did it happen to us? The IRO, do they remember us? I don't know. But just that people thought to make an IRO for people like us is to be happy.
Wait,
you see?
Tommy. I mean, are you happy about it? What has become of you?
Again, the question. Mr. Bill, let me tell you just this, no more. I am happy with the weather shining, with the rain wet, with the snow cold. But I am human. I know half the world is hungry, but I am human. I still make me very mad at Erica. She doesn't put me enough salt in the meat. Think of that. This is the thing that is all that makes me angry now. No, I am not idealist to think I am happy. I just try to secure my everyday meal and eat it in peace, that's all. And not to harm anybody if I can help it. And to dream what everybody else dreams. But you know, the dreams we used to have came true. Now we are here. We have to find new dreams for what we want to be. Mr. Bill, you saw us yesterday in Austria. You see us today in Canada. Come back and see us again tomorrow.
I looked at the clock, 3 a.m. We'd talked long about the two worlds, and now it was tomorrow. Tomorrow for two young people. We said awkward goodbyes, made promises to write. It was Erica who saw me at the door. She stood there. I put out my hand to her.
Mr. Bill.
Yes?
Here is the truth. We, people like us, do not ask to be happy. Only to be in the bright lights, to walk freely in the street, and to forget, if we can, how hard it was back there in the mud.
And Erica took my hand and kissed it. I walked down the stairs and away from 3800 Boulevard West. It had dropped to 25 below zero. I did not feel the cold. This is Herbert Marshall. It took just 30 minutes to tell you the true story of Tommy and Erica. Their story is over. Their tomorrow for two is here. But it would take hours to tell of the thousands upon thousands of people just like them, hoping to be resettled, waiting in the dark yesterdays from which Tommy and Erica have escaped. Their life today was made possible by the International Refugee Organization of the United Nations, who cared for them while they were in Germany and who moved them to Canada just as soon as there was an offer from an understanding Canadian. By understanding and by remembering stories such as you've heard today, you can help the IRO and the United Nations bring a brighter tomorrow, not just to two, but to thousands.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Canada is one of a great family of nations, welcoming new citizens to new worlds. Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Brazil, France, Israel, New Zealand, and Venezuela. These are just a few of the many countries that have offered new homes, new jobs, and a new start in life to tens of thousands. You have been listening to Mr. Herbert Marshall in Tomorrow for Two, a special United Nations broadcast written by Alan Sloan and directed by Mava Moore. Louis Applebaum composed and conducted the score. The program originated in the Toronto studios of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation and was produced by Gerald Keane of United Nations Radio.